Okay, I hope the TV is muted. We'll find out in a second. No feedback from the TV. Good. All right, then I would call to order this regular monthly meeting or March meeting of the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees. 7:02 p.m. All of our trustees are present. One via Zoom, the rest in person. I hope everyone online can hear me well enough. If not, indicate with something. Of course, if you can't hear me, you won't know that I'm speaking. So, Tammy, how's it sound? That's camera view.
Sorry, really good.
Good. Item number 2 on the agenda. Any changes to the agenda? Anything to add or delete from board members? Keith, anything to add or subtract? Okay. Then item number 3 on the okay. Item number 3 on the agenda is our public hearing for local law 1 of 2022, which is a local law to override the tax levy limitations in general municipal law section 3C for fiscal year 2022 and 2023. I'll give I won't actually read it unless anyone requests it, but I'll give a very brief overview of it. Beginning in 2011 or 12, I don't actually remember when, New York State passed a law which subjects local municipalities to a limit on how much they can increase their tax levies, but it gave an ability for those local municipalities to override that law. I think it does require a majority +1 vote. We have overridden said law every single year since its passage, not because we have needed to, but because sometimes we needed to, but we have primarily done so because we want the flexibility to increase the tax levy above the state prescribed cap. And also it is something of a lodging of protest at Albany's desire to micromanage local municipalities without any knowledge whatsoever of what it takes to run a local municipality. So that's my 5-second soapbox. And so I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing on local law 1 of 2022.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We lose Keith? No, Keith is still there. All right, so we are in our public hearing.
Sorry.
No problem. This is an opportunity for any members of the public who are present in person or online to comment on the tax cap override. Was that a hand? Yeah, go ahead, Scott. Just need to unmute you first.
All right. Thank you. Scott Eevee, 29 Washington. Hello, everybody. I just had a question. I want to make sure, and I know you've done this every year, so this is the first time I've really paid any attention. I just want to make sure that I think the assessments across Trumansburg probably went up around somewhere between 10 and 15% this year. So just naturally, if you didn't do anything, I just want to make sure that's factored in. So when they have the override calculation, you factor that in first before you increase the tax levy. I just want to understand that. That's all.
Sure. So I'm actually glad you mentioned that. We were going to briefly discuss that in our budget public hearing. Trying to decide where to look. The camera's right there. The budget public hearing will be next month. So the assessments don't become official until July. So this year's village taxes will be based off of last year's assessment. Your school taxes in September, your town and county taxes next January will be based off of these new assessments that everyone has just received. So when you receive your assessment notice, they give you a certain period of time to file a grievance if you feel that it's not justified. So that's why we have a July 1 effective date for the final assessment. So this budget year, the village will not be using the new assessment numbers. We'll be using well, technically it's last year's. They went up 0.7%, so it's essentially the same.
All right, thanks a lot. That's a great explanation. Appreciate it.
I will say that my preamble to the public hearing, we actually are able to keep, and again, we're going to talk about this in the public hearing next month, but we are able to keep our tax rate flat this year, even using the old assessments. We are seeing a tax levy increase that's well under the tax cap. So we have some structural changes in terms of staffing in a couple of departments, as well as some budget allocations we've made. So this will be the 4th consecutive year where we've kept the tax rate flat. So I think we're quite pleased that we were able to do that. Next year, of course, when we are using the higher or the new assessments, we'll have that to factor in when we're building the budget. But even without that, we were able to keep the budget fairly well in line to what we were hoping to do. Any other public comment? What else online? There are no other village residents online that other than Keith. That means you, John.
No, I think that Scott and I, when we have our village meetings at Garrett's, this is what we discussed, was that, you know, the last time I think there was it was a few years back, it was not long after I moved here, it might have been 28. When was the last time the assessments were?
Well, they adjust slightly every year, but
There was like
the large scale adjustment
in 2018, maybe.
sounds about right.
And
17.
yeah, and so I think at that point, you guys were able to hold the rate the same, but there was an increase because of the,
Right.
So that's what Scott and I were talking about. So the assessments, the preliminary assessments are going up again fairly, but when we looked at the assessments online,
Right.
they're going up.
Yeah, I will say, I'm sorry, go ahead. Cut you off. I will say I've had conversation with Tompkins County Assessment, and this year, what we are seeing in these assessments countywide is the largest assessment increase that we've seen in probably 30 years. That is a function of the real estate market. But again, I'm pleased this will be the 4th consecutive year that the village tax rate will remain at 725. So we've held it flat. We are of the 6, is it 5 or 6? 6 villages and the city of Ithaca. In Tompkins County, there are 6 villages. If we add the city of Ithaca into that, we are the median. We are right in the middle. So do what we can to manage that.
Well, Scott and I we didn't give them the compliment though, Scott, before we discussed, so I'll deliver that, but we are overwhelmingly pleased with the function of the village, and we are happy. I watched, I was sick, couldn't come here. I love your State of the Village meeting. I couldn't come. I watched the whole 2.5-hour thing on the recorded version, but just really pleased with everything that, you know, and the stuff that you've done, I mean, the comprehensive plan and the zoning, you know, the activities that Jessica does, Ben's contributions, and always thoughtful. You're the Camp Barton, all good. So our meetings at Garrett's are
Very productive.
yeah.
I'm a little nervous that you're about to break up with us. You're not moving away, are you?
No.
Okay.
Scott already did. We just broke up with us recently.
Yeah, I'm at Garrett's right now. No, thanks a lot. We're very happy about all the stuff going on, especially the Camp Barton is especially exciting. So thanks a lot for all the great work. We appreciate it. And you can
Well, I
join us
appreciate
at
it.
Garrett's anytime.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you both. Yeah, no, much appreciated.
It's a genuine compliment. You guys are doing great work for us, and listening to that State of the Village and the stuff that was going on behind the scenes with, and I don't want to get really a lot of work that you did, Gordon. So
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
talking to the people at the state level. Yeah, great.
Yeah, we'll stick around. Maybe you'll hear more about crazy EMS conversations. Had another one today. Any other comment on the tax cap override? Then I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing on local law 1 of 2022.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so if Tammy's ready, I would switch this view here. I would entertain a motion to adopt local law 1 of 2022, overriding the tax levy limitations in GMU section 3C for fiscal year 2022 and 23.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Keith, anything?
Nope.
All right, then all in favor of adopting local law 1 of 2022 as presented, please say aye. Any opposed? All right, Tammy, it's yours to file. Let's see, item number 4 is a presentation from Fernando de Aragon of the Ithaca-Tompkins County Transportation Council. A little ahead of schedule, Fernando. I hope that's okay with you. There you are.
That's perfectly fine. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you great. Take it away.
Excellent, excellent. So, you ready for me? Can I share the screen? I have a PowerPoint I like to.
Yeah, 1 second. See if that'll let you know.
Yes, very good. And very good. Can you folks see that all right?
Yes.
Great. So my name is Fernando de Aragon. I direct the Ithaca-Tompkins County Transportation Council. And we're a little bit of an obscure agency, and my board members have asked that I kind of do a little tour of the county and just kind of introduce ourselves. There's a lot of new folks who may not know who we are and what we do. And we want to make sure you know who we are and what we do so that we can be of help. And you can consider us as a resource in your community. So we are, our agency is what's called a Metropolitan Planning Organization. These are agencies that are defined by federal legislation and required by federal legislation in urban areas that are of 50,000 or more population. Now the urban area is defined by the census, and in our case, it's Ithaca is the urban area, and the based on density measures, the population of that urban area, which is more than the city, it's the city and its suburbs or nearby communities, it's over 50,000, and therefore we get to have an MPO, which is it's very advantageous because it gives us a much closer look and more control on the use of federal surface transportation dollars, which is our mandate, to manage and provide a local voice for the use of federal surface transportation dollars. We don't deal with federal aviation, and in our community, we don't have passenger rail, so we really don't deal with rail very much, except where the roads cross a rail line. We provide planning and technical assistance to local governments and community groups in the use of federal money for transportation. And our planning area is Tompkins County. So even though we're defined and identified with the Ithaca urban area, our planning area and the participants are from all of Tompkins County. And I would love to pass the page on this. Uh-oh. Oh, boy. Sorry, I'm having a little technical difficulty.
Okay.
¿Qué pasó? There we go. So there's 14 MPOs across the state. All your favorite urban areas have one. So anybody who's 50,000 or more. We're the smallest one. New York City, of course, is the largest one, and it's very interesting to sit at the table with them when we're discussing statewide initiatives and whatnot. Our structure is relatively simple. It's sort of mandated by federal regulations, but we have a policy committee comprised of mayors and town supervisors or their representatives, who is the final decision-making body. And we have a planning committee with mostly technical staff, planners, engineers, highway superintendents, who review projects and help fulfill the mission of the agency. And we have a staff of 3 that assist in running the operation. All our funding, by the way, because this got asked previously, all our funding comes from federal sources. So there's no county or local monies helping fund our agency, except as in-kind contributions. Principally by the county. We're hosted by the county, and our office and other services the county offers are the in-kind contribution to our operation. And by the way, if there's any questions, please interrupt. Feel free to interrupt. Happy to answer. So we have a few main mandates. We need to have a long-range transportation plan. It's a 20-year plan that gets produced and updated every 5 years. That is our guiding document. From that, we have what we call a transportation improvement program and our 1-year work program, right? That thing is called the UPWP. There's a lot of acronyms in transportation with the feds. So the 1-year program is internal. It's basically, our annual program of activities that we're going to be working with. More interesting, and I'll spend a little bit of time on the tip, the transportation improvement program is where the money lies in our area. It's sort of why we matter, right? Because we bring money to the table. I'm showing you here an image of what a project looks like in the tip. It identifies, the project name, a brief description, but the teeth of our agency is the fact that we have an actual money is going to specific projects. You can see the projects divided in phases, going from planning to construction and inspection. This page identifies the funding sources, the dates when the money is going to be made available for each of the phases, and you get your totals. Also important is the sponsor of the project. This particular project is a bridge owned by Tompkins County. An important detail is my agency doesn't implement projects. I don't have a staff that builds bridges. The projects are sponsored by municipalities, by the county, and for other activities, it can be like civic groups that get engaged and get federal money to do a variety of things. Folks like Bike Walk Tompkins and Ithaca Car Share that can sometimes tap into federal resources and end up in our programs. There's a lot of funding sources. You don't have to read this page, but there's the feds. There's a lot of silos, unfortunately, in transportation. So you have highway safety money. This National Highway Performance Program, NHPP, is mostly for interstates and principal arterials, of which we only have 2 principal arterials, Route 13 and Route 79 towards Tioga. So every funding line has its sort of its nuances, and we work with the state and the feds and the locals to maximize our use of these monies, and so that we can program as many projects as possible in the community. Because as you can expect, there's never enough money for everything that everybody wants to do, right? The funds can change depending on legislation, and we're going to see some of that with the new infrastructure bill and the new budget that was just passed in DC. So there'll be a number of mostly competitive grants that will be like where it says statewide competitive. There's going to be a series of competitive grants from the feds that municipalities and others can apply for. Real short, quickly, the long range plan has three main components, or three guiding principles or goals that we have. Is to maintain our critical infrastructure. So basically maintain what we have, promote multiple mobility options. That is talking about really trying to provide options for people so we're not as automobile dependent as we are. And engage in community collaboration, because in a small area like ours, without working with our partners, nothing is going to get done. You know, we lack the economies of scale of larger urban areas where there's enough money to hire a lot of contractors and get things done. Here, we need to do it. A lot of what we do internally and working together in collaboration, and we've been able to accomplish quite a bit. I'm very proud of the work we've done in our sector. Some of the benefits, so you can consider, you know, what role the village can take in this program. It's more than anything is about communication, with the topic of collaboration being in place. You know, having a seat at the table. We meet on a monthly basis. DOT is at the table. The feds are there. Other municipalities, your neighbors are there. We discuss different projects and ideas. I think most importantly, it's a great place to keep informed about different funding opportunities that are available. And of course, having the folks at the table, you can enhance regional coordination and you know, in many of the things we do. For example, Cornell is a participant, and you know, every year there's the conversation of, you know, when graduation is going to happen, what roads people are going to be taking, what detours are needed. Or every year there's a construction season. The folks have those conversations of, you know, what's going to be happening this year, how are we going to be impacted, and so this, you know, it happens kind of organically and holistically, but it's I think very important. And of course, we always get to the projects and the money and implementing those initiatives. That, you know, that's all I have that I wanted to present, but I'd love to engage if you have any questions. Be happy to entertain anything you may have. It occurred to me, should have brought, when I make a presentation like that, I should identify any examples that are local. I know that in your community used federal TAP grants to redo the downtown village sidewalks, and I don't know if any of you were involved with that initiative. I won't lie to you, because if you were, you may have a little PTSD from that. Federal projects have a lot of complexity. The advantage is that they do bring a fair amount of money. Usually they're an 80-20 match. So the locals put 20%, the feds put 80%. So for larger projects, it can really be advantageous to consider use of federal monies. It's not as good for smaller, you know, if you have a $50,000 or $100,000 project, this is probably not where you want to go for that. But when the money's, we start talking about replacing bridges or redoing roads, or if you have if you want to like rebuild the downtown or something, then this can become an important source of funding to make those ideas become reality.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments from Fernando from the board?
Just thank you for putting this together and reaching out to make contact with us. It's good to know those resources are available.
Sure, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Fernando. I know the Main Street project was TAP funds. A sidewalk project we just completed 4 years ago almost now, was Safe Routes to School money. So we're going to be coming back to the trough here at some point. I don't know if it'll be TIP or TAP, but we are looking at a large Main Street sidewalk project up what would be our West Main Street from kind of the center of town to the county line. Potentially looping in the manufactured home park at the north end of the village. I'd actually like to tie in a piece of property or several pieces of properties on the other side of the county line. So in Seneca County, town of Covert, we have the American Legion, Trumansburg Family Medicine, the doctor's office, and the church. So I think it'll be a fairly substantial project. I was guessing it would be in the $1.5 million range, but with material costs the way they are, it's probably 40% more than that. So,
Right.
So we have our engineering firm looking at which grants would be the most effective to apply for. So you may very well get a request from me for some help depending on what they identify.
Yeah, well, I expect there'll be a TAP grant cycle. And don't quote me on this, but I expect that there's going to be one towards the end of the year, of this year. The advice I can give you now is with this line of funding, with any of the funding we do, is it's good to have your planning done ahead of time. You know what you want to do, get as good estimates as you can, secure your right-of-ways for anything that's like sidewalks or trails. Having the right-of-way secured is so critical. Because when it's time to apply, that's, those are the issues certainly the feds look at. You want to see that you have clear ideas, good estimates and a good layout. So that when they give you the money, it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be construction ready, but it's not the time to be exploring or scoping the project. You should scope it early. And you seem to have a good idea what you want already.
The concept of the project is clear, and the entire project is within DOT right of way. So it should be, unless DOT doesn't like what we want to do. The headache with the Main Street project.
That is certainly a wrinkle. It's something, and it would be with anytime you have more than one jurisdiction involved. You add a level of complexity. There has to be a level of planning, and certainly DOT is jealous of its right of way, and they have their way of doing things, and that'll be. That's why I say this projects that each have their own, take their own life. That's not the way I say it. Have their own way of developing and it's hard to compare one to the other because they each have different dynamics, different players, and complexities. But they're all doable, So, and that one, what you're describing, there's good ideas, and your timing is pretty good with the infrastructure bill. The TAP grant is one of the programs that's most clearly received a boost in funding. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get some projects from our community.
Great. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you for the presentation, and like I said, I'm sure we will be in touch.
Appreciate it. Please contact me anytime.
Will do. Thank you.
Have a good meeting.
All right. Next item on the agenda, and I think she may have just gotten here. We have Gina Cassidy from Cornell Cooperative Extension, who's the CEC coordinator. Ben, did you want to introduce her at all?
I mean, that really is the introduction. I will say, you know, Gina took over for Terry, who we all remember fondly, big shoes to fill, and she has been tremendously helpful in sort of helping me walk through the clean energy community, I don't know, the labyrinth, I guess. But she is here specifically to give sort of a broad overview of the stretch code. So this is the thing that I keep bringing up. Most recently, I ran it by Guy, and he sort of he squashed any dreams I had of a quick process. So I wanted to try and front load as much of this sort of policy discussion, you know, what is this, as possible, so that when we get to the procedural stuff, we can hopefully move through with some grace and speed.
Guy has an internet handle, which is Dream Squasher, by the way, just in case you're wondering. I completely made that up, but you would believe it.
100% believe it. But yeah, with that, I'll turn it over to Gina.
All right, Gina, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. May I share my screen, please?
Sure. 1 second.
Oh, and actually, just to add, I heard this, the PowerPoint that she's going to use is in the Dropbox. So if you want to follow along sort of more closely, it is there for you to use.
All right, Gina, you should have permissions now.
All right. So hello, everyone, and thank you to Ben Carver for inviting me here this evening to present New York Stretch as a possible pathway for the Village of Trumansburg's clean energy goals. New York State's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act of 2019 set ambitious goals for reduction of greenhouse gases and the phase out of fossil fuel dependence. Individual communities are key to meeting these goals by adopting energy efficiency and electrification initiatives. The Clean Energy Communities Program was created to work hand in hand with NYSERDA to offer grants to communities adopting specific clean energy actions. CEC coordinators provide extensive assistance to communities in completing and filing these actions for significant grants. The Clean Energy Communities Program offers overlapping grants. They're action grants for specific approved actions, designation grants for approval of any 4 actions, and several cumulative point-based grants for reaching certain milestone points in approved actions. You can see that the Village of Trumansburg has been busy meeting goals and earning grants through the program. You've already earned a $5,000 designation grant, a $5,000 action grant for a clean heating and cooling campaign, and 2,200 points towards a 3,000 point grant of $10,000. One of the high impact actions the Clean Energy Communities Program offers is New York Stretch. In our grant structure, it provides 1,200 points towards a 3,000 points based grant of $10,000 and carries its own action grant of $5,000. Completing New York Stretch would mean that the Village of Trumansburg qualifies for both these grants. New York Stretch is a more stringent overlay on the current New York State Energy Code, which is designed to provide an additional 11% energy savings. The Clean Energy Communities Program requires that a municipality adopt New York Stretch in an executed local law or ordinance in order to receive credit for this action. Municipalities also have to file with the Department of State. As Clean Energy Coordinator for Tompkins County, I work closely with Ben Carver, your Deputy Mayor, to make sure all steps and documentation are in order and complete. Okay, I wanted to show you a little, that's the end of that part. And I wanted to show you a little clip from a presentation that was done in October by the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board.
What really gets me excited as a builder and thinking of the principle of serving clients, doing no harm, building the houses that they expect to be comfortable, to be durable, anything you would imagine you'd expect from your home, those functions. And so what New York Stretch does is focus on a lot of those. And the comparison document will identify the changes to the building envelope, the insulation, the air sealing, and some of the ventilation standards. But here I want to talk about those requirements within a few case studies. This is a house we actually built in Skinny Atlas around 2007 or 8. That's a ventilation hood above the stove. So one thing New York Stretch focuses on is ventilation, both exhaust and whole house ventilation is a healthy building strategy. And one thing I would suggest, if anyone hasn't reviewed ventilation within this SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, ventilation has emerged as a key pandemic control and reduction strategy for buildings because code only sets a minimum ventilation standard that does not match decades of research in healthy buildings. And what New York Stretch does is recognize the minimum standard, but say you must test to verify the ventilation system as installed actually exhausts the required amount of cubic feet per minute. And the ducts are tight and tested and don't leak above a certain amount. But so some of the benefits generally of New York Stretch, healthy buildings, I think New York Stretch moves us that way based on research pretty significantly. Third-party verified performance and testing based on the code inspections that are already required under the code, but makes those code inspections more clear. Again, more autonomy for enforcement, whether it's the code officer, he or her, doing those inspections or a third party, and then climate and community benefits. So when you look at the healthy buildings data, for example, 90+% of our time indoors, so 82,000 chemicals in common production in buildings and communities, only 5 have been restricted, and only 15% have any sort of data on the health impacts of that. So when you think about indoor environments, and ventilation and air sealing your buildings to be tighter, as builders, I think the duty of care very clearly is to be very aware of the quality of your indoor environment and ensure that those systems are performing. And that's what New York Stretch does. So the way New York Stretch does that on the residential side, for example, enhanced thermal envelope, that's basically the structural, the thermal, the insulation, and the air control layers that are installed in the building. I'll talk about how New York Stretch creates a better building thermal envelope than basic code. Also, in terms of ventilation, as I mentioned, in terms of visual inspections and the performance testing of both the envelope, the air tightness testing the envelope, and then the testing of ventilation becomes very, very critical because you really can't know how it performs unless you test it. And even the best design can be installed in a way that doesn't perform in the field. And so really the only way to know that your houses or building is performing as intended is to complete this testing. And so New York Stretch requires that in certain areas. So this is the first case study I'd like to talk about, home we built in 2004. This, what you're looking at basically, when you look at a building with a system, we removed these studs from the wall. So these are 2x6 by 10-foot studs, 86 of them. At that point, probably only cost about $500 in today's pandemic market. Last time I priced it about $2,000, in addition to some of the other wood. But so when you remove that wood, insulation value of 1 from that wall assembly and replace it with an insulation, you've removed essentially a huge hole from your building. And you've done that at a first cost savings because the framer, it costs less for the framer to not install all of that wood into the assembly. It meets all of the structural requirements by code. And what we're doing is replacing that with insulation, which our insulator didn't understand that there was less wood in the wall and was providing the insulation essentially for free until he went to check his insulation level in the truck and said, you know, Josh, and my father Kevin at that time, hey, I'm low. Why is there more insulation in your house than what I budgeted? And we showed him this picture, and that was probably the last time we got free insulation for the job. But for the life of that house, that envelope is going to perform better because that hole isn't, that large doorway essentially is not in the envelope. And so with the savings of today's prices, when I go to price that today, That's about $2,000 to $2,400 of a savings. That purchases our energy recovery ventilator for free with installation. So at the same cost, I provided a client a healthier indoor environment and a higher performing envelope, and haven't spent a penny more of their money to do it. And those are the sort of decisions that New York Stretch enhances and makes possible. Another really important element of New York Stretch that is contained in base code. It's just made more clear by New York Stretch. For example, this is a photo again of one of our projects where have a raftered ceiling that we use foam there, and we can certainly argue the benefits of foam. We've moved away from it since in many ways because of the climate and carbon impacts of spray foam insulation, but certain applications that worked well, and that's what the client wanted, so that's what we provided. But that's missing insulation at the edge of the wall there to the outside. So I hadn't completed the inspection myself before the building inspector came in, moved that silver insulated duct out of the way to see that the insulation installer had missed that area. That would become an area of failure. All the moisture from the indoor environment would migrate to that point, condense, probably cause mold, durability issues in the future. And what New York Stretch really does is require, and based on existing code, but make more clear what that installation inspection should look like and how it should be conducted. And really, it should only be conducted in accordance with the manufacturer's installation instructions. And those are often referenced in codes. They're the instructions that nobody reads on a job. No one, unfortunately, very few trades and builders. Well, I shouldn't speak badly of us. I'll speak badly of myself. It's very difficult to read those instructions, but they need to because they're a code reference standard. And so what New York Stretch does is make more clear that these products need to be installed as designed and as specified. And the inspection that New York Stretch adds to the code, which is based on the existing code, it's faults like these and issues like these. And then you can go back and correct it. Because you really only have that opportunity once to correct an issue like this before you go to drywall, and then it's covered forever. And the client wonders why it's a cold room, maybe why a small amount of mold appeared on the drywall in that area, long after the builder's gone. And then it's just attributed to a leaky, damp, or old house and not a misinstallation. So same thing on the ventilation side. New York Stretch requires performance testing of the mechanical ventilation system is installed. This is a multifamily project where we had to go find the sheetrockers because they forgot to cut a supply duct out of the ceiling there. So when we went to test the dwelling unit mechanical ventilation, we were tracing the ductwork because you can see the sheetrock hadn't been installed on the ceiling yet. And we traced the duct to the edge of the sheetrock, and it very immediately apparent that they just forgot to cut it out. So that would have, again, been blowing hot, warm air, cool air in the summer against the back of the sheetrock in that location. The residents would have been cold, could have had durability issues begin to grow through time. So looking and verifying things in the field is absolutely essential. And code officers have so much they need to focus on and to be involved with. It's very, very difficult to conduct that inspection as a code officer, given the demands of his or her time. It's they have an incredibly challenging job, and that's where New York Stretch provides flexibility for communities and allowing that authority with jurisdiction, the code officer and the local board to determine how best to structure the code enforcement program and interpret it, which is a key thing. Because under the base code, only the state can issue interpretations of a code, but under New York Stretch, the community is allowed to interpret it. Another was testing of exhaust systems to confirm that they are exhausting the amount of contaminants and moist air from bathrooms, for example, or kitchens and combustion byproducts from the home. So to just confirm that they're functioning as installed. So this is another project that proves that New York Stretch does not have a higher first cost. This is a 3-building phase 2 of a multifamily affordable building project that we worked on in New Hartford, New York, the Meadows. And so we suggested New York Stretch to them just as a guideline to consider because the project had already gone into construction. And they really embraced it, and they looked at it and applied it. And the only first cost they couldn't overcome was the cost of dwelling units, the 102 energy recovery ventilators or heat recovery ventilators that would be required to be installed during construction. So it had been design phase, I think it would have been easy. But here, what the consultants did on the domestic hot water system was save $500 to $1,000 per dwelling unit by looking at New York stretch strategies and alternate compliance paths in the existing code. New York stretch wasn't adopted in this community, but they just looked at New York stretch and alternate compliance paths under the base code, reduced the system, and provided a cost savings to the client. And that's standard design for them going forward. For the domestic hot water systems in these multifamily buildings. So here, I'm going to move really quickly because I see we're getting close to time, about 5 minutes left. So the National Institute of Building Science and FEMA has done some really fantastic research in the area of resilience and how code relates to financial savings for communities that adopt the most recent model code. New York is innovative in this, or advanced in this area. They've already adopted the most recent model code. But what they do, essentially, this study found, when you adopt that most recent code, you return $11 for every dollar invested. So even if there is a higher first cost to a building in New York stretch, it's unavoidable for that project, there's still a benefit returned on that higher code program. And so if you adopt the most recent code, it's $11 in value returned to the community for every dollar that extra code may cost. But when you look at above code programs, that's $4 for every dollar invested. So it's a smaller return on investment for going above code like New York stretch, but it's still a net positive to the community. It's much like recycling or other value-added activities where that first cost, when you look at it from a systems approach or a community approach, there's a very significant benefit for doing this. Very similar to that study, this is a NYSERDA screenshot from the Adapting Buildings Resilience reports they put out. And so it gets really exciting when you think about codes like New York stretch, enhanced thermal envelopes, ventilation, electric ready buildings, and how you can start to future-proof buildings against future climate risks, or how you can meet impending energy codes that are going to require full electrification, which frankly is going to be a challenge for us to think about in some ways, to shift to an all-electric building. But this is just one of many hazards this report identified. And so you can start to see how your envelope is going to deal with future climate and future weather. So it really shifts communities to an innovative approach to dealing with future climate risks and future challenges. And so now to adoption. NYSERDA has created an adoption guide with a model local law for any community to consider. So I joke sometimes I'm also a recovering attorney. I used to practice in land use law. So I understand I would always defer in every case to the municipal attorney and his or her expertise on this, but it's a very standard process. It's the same process as you would to adopt any local law. NYSERDA has already written that draft resolution that satisfies all of the state requirements under Energy Law Article 11-109. The one thing to understand with New York stretch is a little bit different. You also have to make a second filing with the New York State Building Code Council. So they can just do a quick review, essentially, to confirm that local energy code is more strict. And once it's filed, you should do it within 30 days after adoption, because then you can begin immediately enforcing New York stretch. Otherwise, you may need to wait until the Building Code Council issues its determination that it is a higher code. You can also vary the provisions of New York stretch and submit it. But the benefit with New York stretch is NYSERDA has already done that work to verify through intensive energy modeling and related analysis that it is an above code program. So it can be varied, but that's a conversation with NYSERDA, particularly as it relates to the incentives and the money that's available for adopting New York stretch. But in many ways, the mandatory requirements that are mandatory under any compliance path in the code haven't caused a problem. It's some of the optional measures that aren't mandatory that can be confusing. But once communities see that not everything is mandatory in the code, and it only modifies the existing code, it becomes a much easier conversation. So I'm not sure, Amanda, if I hit everything on the adoption side that you wanted me to discuss, but that link provides those resources. So you'd follow the same process as any local law. And just with that one additional filing under energy laws, Article 11-109.
I'm going to stop there. Thank you all for listening. And I can answer some questions. I have a colleague of mine, Lou Vogel from Tatum Engineering, who is a consultant for NYSERDA, who can answer actual technical questions. I can answer questions about the CEC program and the requirements for filing.
Hi, everybody.
Lou, how are you? Thanks, Gina. Appreciate the presentation. Any
you.
questions for Gina from the board?
For me, and if there are any moving forward, I'd be happy to relay them or, get answers if anything comes up later on.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it. We're kind of, I think, in the semi-early, mid-middle
I thought
stage.
we were almost done.
Stage of considering this, so I'm sure we'll be relaying questions to you over time, but glad that you and Ben talk regularly so that we can have an open conduit of communication for whatever questions the board has, but I don't.
Let me say, I don't know why it just didn't come up in, I meant to tell you this, but there is an expiration date for this action, right? June 30th, 2022 is the end of the possibility for filing this action. So if you want to do it, I would not put it on the back burner.
So I did have a question. So this is then also something that is reviewed and enforced by the building inspectors. They would just look to see that regular code plus stretch code was being maintained. How's that, like, thinking of the inspection level? Who's checking to make sure all the extra measures are done and it then becomes your code, so they're already done, or they're gonna have to refer to a separate area? It just gets adopted in. Okay.
Yeah, and your code officer just goes by that when they're inspecting buildings.
Okay.
And we are putting together a comparison document and an inspection checklist also for the stretch code. And I wanted to mention a couple things that there have been some confusion on. There is an Eevee electrical requirement, but it's only to provide a room for a breaker and the capacity in the service entrance, and then a conduit or wiring out to the location where an electric vehicle might get charged. It's not requiring the actual charger. And similar thing with the solar ready, that there's some difference between residential and commercial, but it's just requiring space for a breaker and no service requirement, and then a conduit up to the roof or outside, just so that it can be ready to be done, and will be much less expensive to be done in the future. And then there's a new issue has come up in the last few months with the energy recovery ventilator. So as you get into closer to it, if you're considering it, it is the possibility of severing that requirement. It is one of the more expensive aspects of it, but it does provide definitely a good ventilation improvement to the building. That's it.
Great, thank you. Any additional?
I have a question for Ben, actually. Do you have a way of summarizing guys' concerns with moving forward?
Guys' concerns were primarily procedural. So the way that NYSERDA suggests adopting this is what Guy termed adopt a code, or at least that was his impression. So the question will be, to what degree do we need to amend, rewrite, and represent a bigger document, a bigger law? And to what degree can we just say, we adopt all of this stuff over here without actually putting all of that in our code? But I believe, and I haven't actually had a chance to look through it, but I believe Gina may have just solved that problem. Because I believe I have all of that in one document. So that won't be a big deal. We also have to do seeker. So procedurally, we may be more down to the wire than I realized. I actually wasn't aware of the deadline. But those are the two big things.
And one thing that didn't occur in the presentation was that when they created the stretch code, they tried really hard to make sure that if there's anything that's any additional parts or any different parts that they are shelf ready. That's something that you could find at any like home improvement store. It's not, things that are exotic or not readily available.
Good. Well, thank you, Gina. Thank you, Lou. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
You bet.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Lou.
all. Bye-bye.
Okay. Item number 6, public comment period. Our first privilege of the floor. We have Scott's still here. So we have 1 member of the public online, 2 in person. So if anyone has anything they'd like to say or ask, please feel free.
Janice Broussard, 13th South Street.
Yeah, James, good to see you.
Hear about garden club things once again.
I'm sorry.
I'm here about organic garden club
Yes.
issues.
Yes.
I had written you and Ben and note about what's happening with the signs, beautification grants, etc.
Sure.
And Ben said he suggested I write Dan Corman. She didn't answer me either.
Okay.
So I would like an update. We have a meeting this week. It's time for us to start thinking about what we're going to do for the season.
Sure.
So signs, number 1, what's happening with the signs?
And I apologize. My last recollection, if I missed it, I apologize. My last recollection of an email was when we had talked about INHS giving permission to relocate that sign.
This
So,
was like about a week ago. I checked and.
okay. So there is no, at this time, we're holding off on redesign of signs.
Okay.
Certainly for this season. I mean, even if we move forward with a sign redesign, we're not going to be ready by Thursday when it's 60 degrees.
Yeah.
So I believe it's on Dusty's list. If you want to check the sign at the north end, which is actually on private property, we have permission to move it onto the first part of, it's how we describe the first part of vacant space, which is now INHS property, where the hope for future fire hall will be. Their only request was that it be given enough space from the non-sidewalk area so that their folks who might be mowing can mow around it without interfering with traffic. Dusty is aware of it and had looked at it at the spacing last fall and said we can do it this spring. So as far as the signs themselves, they won't be replaced this year.
Places here, and do you have an approximate time to move the sign, north sign to the INHS property?
That'll be, Ben will have to talk to Dusty about that.
I can get back to you.
I also wrote Dusty, he didn't answer me.
Yeah.
So,
And no, that'll be DPW to move. No one else is gonna move it, so.
yeah, well, then a bed is gonna have to be created there as well.
Right.
And so that's where we're looking for beautification grants to fund that, because we refurbished the one at the, well, first at the water tower, and then now the one over here at the Shore Safe, cost about $600 to have that, dug up, put in, the right soil and
Right.
fertilizers, and put a boundary around it, so when they do mow, that they
Right.
have an edge on them.
Right.
And then, of course, there's the plantings, which we spend between $200 and $400 a year for the 6 signs that we take care of.
Sure.
The 6 locations that we take care of.
Yeah, I think when they move the sign, they can certainly dig up the area just enough. So there's some site prep done. If it's just a few $100s, I'm sure the village can cover most of that. I don't anticipate any beautification money.
No,
I don't anticipate that the county, so what the county has is their, what is it, $6.5 or $7 million of ARPA funds, which they have earmarked for a grant process application for local municipalities. The last I knew, and Ann is on, so maybe she can speak to this when she comes on in a minute. The last I knew, they were still looking for some third-party assistance to help administer that. So I don't know where they are in that cycle, but certainly I don't believe, and I don't want to speak for Ann, but certainly nothing that's going to make money available within the next 2 months. When you're looking to do work. So I would just, we're talking hundreds, not thousands. I would just, if you have a spend and you don't have the money, just let me know. And we'll see how we can figure out a way to try to accommodate.
Right, well, we have a meeting on Thursday and we'll share that information with the club to see what they decide they want to do.
Yeah, I guess we would plan on, the ground's not fully thawed yet, but I guess we would plan on having the sign moved in March. I mean, probably looking early April at the earliest.
Okay,
Would be my guess, if Dusty can arrange that or
okay.
schedule it. She's like,
I think probably we'll do nothing with the north sign this year until that's established.
Okay.
And then try to move maybe the bushes that are there, but not do any new plantings until there's no point in putting money into something that's not going to exist anymore.
Right.
And, okay,
right,
that was the next thing. So no signs, possibility the DPW will move it, and no beautification grant funds.
no new signs, definitely DPW will move it. I just can't give you the day.
Okay, that's all right.
And I don't believe there's going to be beautification funds this year unless, Ann corrects me when she comes on here in 5 minutes.
The last time I
Next.
checked with the county, end of last year, they said that it wasn't in the budget for that beautification fund, so. I was anticipating that wouldn't be good this year. Ann had messaged me saying she's driving to Elmira to pick someone up at the airport, so she might be in and out.
Okay.
So we'll see if she's able to.
So, but you were the one who told me to ask Ian about beautification grants.
Yeah, right. I mean, she would have the final word on it because it's through the county. Sorry if I didn't relay that I had heard. I can't remember the timing of when I heard that piece of information. I apologize if I didn't pass it on to you.
Okay.
All right, thanks, James.
Please make sure you send our gratitude to your club when you meet with them.
All right, any other public comments? Which would be Joe or Scott again. All right, we'll move on to reports from representatives. We have Ann and Mary, and I think Ann may be on the road. So Mary, if you're ready and want to go, take it away. If you're there or possibly not there. How about you, Ann? Are you available?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay, you're coming in and out, so I'll do the best I can. I heard you talking a little bit maybe about the ARPA funds, so I could start with that. So we put a good portion of our ARPA funds into our capital expenses, and then we set up a community recovery fund. It is $6.5 million dollars, and there's 3 categories. I can't remember if I reviewed these last month, but 3 categories of funds: 10,000 to 25,000, and there's $500,000 in that, and then 25,000 to 250,000, and there's 1.5 million in that, and then above that amount there is 4 million. And that still leaves us with about $500,000. We're not sure if we're going to need that to spend on our consultants that we still have not hired yet. We're still working on that, or if we're going to use that money towards the other funds. Let's see. Next would be COVID issues. We have 5 people in the hospital, but as people know, the mandate for wearing masks indoors has been lifted, and as far we have the allowance to have meetings remotely for municipals, it expires the 16th, but we might have an extension on that, so we're waiting to hear on that. And as you know, the municipal meetings with the county are now moved to monthly. So those are the major things I have without all my paperwork in front of me. Any questions on that stuff?
Thank you, Ann. No, I think, appreciate that. I don't think we have any questions at the moment, but appreciate it. Not sure if you can hear me or not. Mary. you're
Yeah,
next.
so, sorry about that. I couldn't unmute myself there momentarily. So the town just last week passed a resolution, and I think you are considering it maybe at your meeting tonight. We were presented with a resolution drafted by New York State. It was a request to purchase Camp Barton and a statement of intention to negotiate a cooperative agreement with possible other municipalities for management of the property. So we're very excited about that. Caitlin and Rich Goldman will negotiate on our behalf with New York State. You know, we realize that this is not going to be an easy or simple thing, but we're really excited about the possibility of having, you know, a park where Camp Barton is. Let's see. We also discussed the stretch code adoption. And it was a little surprising when we found out that June 30th was the deadline for getting the grant money for adopting the code. So we are going to see if we can possibly pull this off within the next 2 or 3 months, because we have to pass a local law, and you know, as you know, that takes time. And the final thing that I have here is just very simple. We hired a deputy clerk, Barbara Bennett. That position has been open for 4.5 months. So our town clerk, Carissa, is very happy about that. So now she has some relief. That's about it.
Well, thank you, Mary. Any questions from the board for Mary? Well, thank you much. And yes, we will be considering the Camp Barton MOU and resolution here in about 5 minutes. Well, thank you. Let's see, no other representatives online. So that takes us to item number 8, which is our consent agenda. We have meeting minutes from our last month's meeting, Valentine's Day, February 14th, as well as our abstract, which I will read through here now. We have a general fund abstract totaling $269,556.60. We have the EMS billing abstract totaling $18,623.70. Water fund abstract totaling $44,260.31. Sewer fund abstract $16,196.89. And lastly, the trust and agency abstract totaling $27,135.22. So I would entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda and its 2 items as presented. So
Second.
any discussion? Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. So item number 9 is board member reports. Go first, and the aforementioned Ken Barton documentation. Waiting for my computer to come back up. So the first of the two items is a draft MOU. The memorandum of understanding is between us and currently the town of Ulysses. No word yet. I think we're meeting tonight actually on the town of Covert and whether they would like to participate. I will read the MOU into the record just to be clear of what we're doing here. The MOU reads, this memorandum of understanding is made effective the, I guess, 14th, if we pass it, day of March 2022 by and among the towns of currently Ulysses and the village of Trumansburg, each being a municipal corporation under the laws of the state of New York, each being a participating municipality and collectively the municipalities. This MOU formally states the intention of the municipalities herein named to negotiate a license to operate Camp Barton / Frontenac Point State Park upon successful acquisition of the property by the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation from the Baden-Powell Boy Scouts Council. The municipalities further agree as follows. Camp Barton consists of approximately 129 acres of largely undeveloped land, including extensive waterfront on Cuba Lake at Frontenac Point. Barton is considered critical to providing public access to Cuba Lake, particularly to youth organizations and to the environment and watershed of Cuba Lake. Accordingly, the municipalities agree as follows. Each of the municipalities shall name no more than 2, but not less than 1 responsible person to negotiate with OPRHP on behalf of their respective municipality. All communications by and among members of the working group shall be reduced to writing and shall be made available to each of the municipalities. Any municipality choosing not to join in this MOU may be later included only upon unanimous agreement of the participating municipalities. This memo is executed by the person signing below, each of whom has been authorized to do so by the governing body of the municipality joining in this memo. A couple of quick things to point out. 129 acres of land, approximately 40 of it was listed for sale up along Route 89. That has since went under contract within about 4 days. And I believe it's scheduled to close relatively soon. I don't know who the purchaser is. I don't have any inside information on the transaction. I do believe it was a cash offer. I have heard that it's likely that the purchaser is a local who does not intend to develop it. So that will be, once it's closed, we'll find out who that person is and we can reach out to them and see if they want to be somehow participating in the utilization of the land, if in fact they are someone who is not going to be developing. So stay tuned on that. The second document, which was prepared by New York State, and actually take that back. It was prepared by me and edited by attorneys at State Parks, because we love our attorneys at State Parks. And I'll read this resolution, and we can adopt these. We should adopt these separately if we do in fact adopt them, but we can discuss it first. So the MOU is between us and whoever participates. This resolution is what Parks wants to see. This goes to them to indicate that this working group is now formally voted to move forward. So the resolution states that whereas Camp Barton is a 129-acre property located on the western shore of Cuba Lake in Seneca County, town of Covert, and whereas the Baden-Powell Council of the Boy Scouts of America has initiated proceedings for the sale of this property, and I apologize, let me pause 1 second. I feel like there's a clause missing. I'm just going from memory. There was a sentence that the lawyers added, and I don't remember to which document. The lawyers wanted a sentence that stated that we had the authority to spend money outside of our jurisdiction.
That was in there.
That one.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it though. I wonder if I have an older doc here for some reason.
Actually, I remember
What's right, I was seeing.
very clearly.
So
reading
whereas
that.
it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whereas is down right before the first line.
Allocate funds.
Oh, okay, good, so it is in there. All right, let's try that again. Whereas Camp Barton is a 129-acre property located on the western shore of People Lake in Seneca County, town of Culver, and whereas the Baden-Powell Council of the Boy Scouts of America has initiated proceedings for the sale of this property, and whereas the municipalities of the town of Covert, the town of Ulysses, and village of Trumansburg passed a joint memorandum of understanding in November 2021, declaring that the three municipalities would work on, quote, finding means to preserve for public use and enjoyment all or a portion of the Boy Scout Camp Barton, end quote, and that, quote, Barton is considered critical to providing public access to Cuba Lake, particularly to youth organizations and to the environment and watershed of Cuba Lake, end quote. And whereas the three municipalities have formed a working group and are desirous to have assistance from the state of New York to acquire and protect Camp Barton and make it available for use by the general public. And whereas the town of Ulysses and the village of Trumansburg have the authority to allocate funds and resources outside of their respective geographic boundaries. Now therefore be it resolved that the municipalities of, in this case, the village of Trumansburg, requests that the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation acquire that portion of the Camp Barton property, which includes no less than the waterfront, the main camp, and Frontenac Falls. And be it further resolved that the municipalities of the village of Trumansburg intend to negotiate a cooperative operation and maintenance agreement with the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, and that they would collectively assume operational and maintenance costs and responsibilities for those portions of the Camp Barton property that is acquired by OPRHP. So those are our two documents to consider. And why don't we, unless there's an objection, why don't we move the MOU and then we can discuss if someone would like to move the adoption of the draft MOU.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, now, as everyone was watching procedures lately, we have a motion and a second conversation and discussion on the MOU.
I mean, I think it's fantastic. It's just what we talked about before. I don't see anything. I'm excited that it's moving forward. It feels like a good step.
Yeah, I was actually expecting, not in a bad way or a good way, like I thought there was gonna be more there, and this is just like, yep, we're moving forward, yes, we're taking the next step, I see nothing to object. I mean, really ever, but.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised at how little Fred seemed like he was requesting, and I was saying I was expecting that the MOU would have more in it, but it really is just exactly what you described in our joint meeting.
I have two questions. One is, all communications by and among members is reduced to writing. And shall be, so does that mean like, it has to be recorded somewhere? So if there's emails, that has to be filed and recorded, and then it should be, and if you have a meeting, there should be minutes that are detailed and taken.
So if we meet in person, we're gonna have some type of minutes taken.
Okay.
It's more for, because these are not, if you have whoever the representatives are, it's not it's not like a quorum of some kind. So you could potentially have a lot of email communication. So it's
Okay.
just to make sure that
To make sure everyone has
everyone
access
is
and
looped in.
transparency. Okay. And then, so clearly then we would hope that you would be the primary representative, but it probably makes second that good sense to have somebody else, right? So that.
I'd be more than happy to have someone raise their hand.
I would gladly raise my hand.
Okay.
Great.
Like enthusiastically.
We should raise both. That's a little much.
That feels that. Yeah. I mean, there are lines.
Okay, yeah, that's great.
Great. Well, then if there are no concerns about the MOU, we have a motion in a second, then I would call for a vote. All in favor of adopting this MOU to proceed with so far just the town of Ulysses, you say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. So for the resolution itself, well, first I would entertain a motion to adopt the resolution to proceed with, and this is the real work, proceed with the collective negotiation with state parks on the operating agreement should they in fact end up purchasing the property. So, second. Motion in a second. Any conversation on this? Questions as to the language, timeline, process?
This one I was quite relieved actually that there wasn't more detail. Just that the operational and maintenance costs and responsibilities aren't spelled, that they weren't starting to put constraints and restrictions there. So I'm happy to see that that's still wide open.
And also that the 129 acres, some of which, I suppose it's their land, something could sell now without knowing that the key spaces were outlined. It is comfortable.
Yeah, the actual option. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry if I missed this. When are we expecting Colbert to make their decision?
They have a meeting tonight. I have not heard any word about whether they will be considering this or not this evening. We'll know by tomorrow, I'm sure.
But they will reach some sort of a judgment by the end of the night.
I don't know that. Yeah, the actual operation and maintenance agreement is where things are spelled out in terms of who, what the timeline will look like, what we're responsible for, and so on. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, concerns? Okay, then, hearing no objections, all in favor of adopting this resolution to proceed with negotiations with the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. So we will get those, we'll pass that word along to Fred and Tommy Ulysses. Sure. Okay, moving along on the board member reports, effective at the end of the month, we will have a planning board vacancy. Greg Hutnick, planning board member, will be actually moving out of the village. So effective at the end of the month, he has to vacate a seat. I do want to thank Greg for his service on the board. I appreciate his email, some of the emails he and I have exchanged about various topics. So if you're listening or hear about this, thank you, Greg. Appreciate your service for the village. And then I will be hopefully appointing the replacement to that seat at our April organizational meeting. I have an appointment to a ad hoc committee that we formed, our Events and Tourism Committee. I'm appointing effective immediately Jen Demarest, village resident, to join Jessica Nana and Karen Powers when she's available to do all things events and tourism.
Very exciting.
As we look forward to our 150th anniversary celebrations this summer. I would like to have us reconsider, and for discussion tonight, we don't have to decide tonight, but I'd like some feedback from the four of you on the possibility of going to bi-monthly meetings. We had discussed it very briefly before.
Additional.
An additional meeting. Now, yeah, not every other month.
Yeah,
Twice a
Like
week.
that.
Yeah. The twice a month of bi-monthly, not the every other month bi-monthly, because English is so easy.
Fortnightly.
Fortnightly, I like that. I think that on a night like tonight, where we will be really lucky to get out of here by 10, I think maybe 2 meetings a month that are capped at 2 hours, and we can decide for bill paying purposes, we need to do the abstract, all of that's a lot quicker now. We can have, perhaps we can have guests. We'll have to decide, how do we want to do this? Do we want guests to come speak at the second meeting? Do we want to do meeting minutes, abstracts, board member reports at the first meeting? I'd like to have some consistency to how those 2 meetings are structured. I'd like to put things in the second meeting that if we don't have any that month, we can cancel the meeting. Because it's always easier to cancel one than to schedule one. But I think 2-hour meetings a month, especially coming out of budget season where we're kind of used to multiple meetings, 2-hour meetings a month seems more manageable than 1 4.5-hour meeting a month. But I'm open to, I've been doing 4-hour meetings for a long time, so I'm open to continuing to do that. But wondered what you all thought.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Keith said last time it'd be nice to have a meeting that was a little bit more open in terms of agenda where we could really be brainstorming and thinking a little bit outside of just like, very, here, this is what we need to get done. And I totally agree with that. And I also like the idea of having not 4.5-hour meetings.
I'm interested, I think the later you start, the better. I'm flexible on that, but I think that gets into like giving more time for bedtime, dinner, that sort of thing, than rushing out the house. I can see other ways of doing it, so if other people have different opinions on early and later, or alternating it potentially. But once it gets to about, it was more like a 7:30 start, or at least one of them was, at least for my household and family, that ended up being kind of most of the way through bedtime, and so it's less of a burden that we're gonna add into the meeting.
Okay.
I think it was wise to bring this back up after budget season, because it definitely seems like nice. Sure, yeah, we do that. We just meet all the time. So I think that that's a really great idea. I cringe at starting later because I fade. But I do like the notion
And you have
of,
older kids.
and I have older kids, but also it's easier. Like I go home, I make supper, I come here, and then they're putting themselves to bed, but being home, making supper, and then hanging out, but not doing anything else for like 45 minutes is the part that's like, why am I not doing something?
Right.
But I would definitely be open to maybe it can alternate. I think that makes sense. So yeah, great. Let's do it.
Keith, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I like it for a reason that Ben, that again, that I had brought up before. The only thing that makes me a little hesitant is, as a parent, I think it's assumed that when we do have a meeting, it's just that night's a wash. I'm not expected, whether it's a 2-hour meeting or a 4.5-hour meeting, I'm not expected to, that I'm written off for once a month. So I guess my only concern would be that it would now be twice a month. But you know, I think the nice thing is we clearly have meeting flexibility now with the Zoom, and I would actually, I guess I'm flexible on the timing, but actually earlier would be better, get my vote, like a 6 to 8 versus a 7 to 9. But I know, again, I also have older kids that would still be up when I got home. So probably, we can keep the meeting time. I'm flexible on the meeting time, but that would be my only hesitation is now, 2 nights is 2 nights versus 1 long night. But I would still go for it. I'd be open to it.
Keith, I feel like this is an opportune time to remind you that you were maybe going to join the youth commission as well. And that brings you up to 3 nights. So
that one, that's fine. That's I'm actually being encouraged to do that by my spouse. So I think that would be.
So you get that.
But I do think you raised a good point, Keith, and Vern, you said it too, that if the flavor of the meetings or the theme of the meetings is more a little bit identified, then it would be easy to say that second meeting really is going to be held to 2 hours unless there's serious business at hand. It's easier to conceive that could happen, I think.
And also emphasizing again, when you said at the start that it's easy to cancel a meeting, it's much easier than scheduling one. So I don't think this is something where we should try to avoid, I think, just filling it up because it's like, well, it's on the calendar. I think it really only is useful if we continue to make it useful.
I think the 7 o'clock start originally, going back 1,000 years, was probably to accommodate residents showing up. after. kind of
After
dinner,
business hours.
After business hours or even after an early dinner hour.
Yeah,
We're certainly the only board that I've ever seen anywhere at any time that all board members have school-age children. So that's a new thing. It doesn't exist anywhere else on the planet that I'm aware of.
My kids aren't in school yet.
School age or preschool age. Well, why don't we do this? For our organizational meeting, we have to list the meeting dates, so we'll just throw in the second meeting, second and fourth Monday, or
yeah. I like the Monday, keeping it the same.
I agree with that.
we will see how that works, and we can always change it and go back.
Okay,
But I do prefer it to saying, let's schedule a special meeting to talk about X, Y, or Z. If we just know that something comes up and we'll throw it on the agenda for the second meeting, then that gives us a little bit more flexibility on that side.
Okay.
Okay, good. And then the last thing is, I just want to take a moment to, both on behalf of the village and personally, acknowledge the passing of Hector Town Supervisor Alvin White, who passed away a couple of weeks ago. I did not know Alvin well at all on a personal level, but I had gotten to know him fairly well, I would say, on a village professional level. He was one of those folks who he had served on the town board in Hector since, I believe, the late 90s. As a town board member and then supervisor for the last 6 or so, I believe. And he was just one of those really genuine individuals who was not, and I say this knowing that village election is tomorrow, he was not what you think of as a politician. He was someone who served his community on the board because that's what he believed was his best way that he was able to contribute to the community. He was an EMT once upon a time, and he really understood the fire services and EMS and all of the structural issues that we talk about every day in terms of rural upstate municipalities being able to continue to provide those services. So he talk about leaving big shoes to fill. He will be very, very missed, and wanted to acknowledge his service and his friendship to the village of Trumansburg. So that's that.
thank you.
Fire, TACC, ETC, CWIO, and a partridge in a pear tree.
Okay, so I'm gonna read the fire calls, but not from my computer, I'm reading from my phone. And give me one moment. I was not at the last meeting because we were in budget session, but things are going well, and we should know that great progress is made in the rescue tool fund. They're near their goal. There's still plenty of room to contribute if people wanted to feel like they were participating in that. For sure, you can reach out to the fire company on the Facebook page, or through any of the QR codes located in all kinds of area locations. Oh, open. What's going on? There we go. Okay, so for February, there are only a total of 13 calls in February, 8 to the village of Trumansburg, which is 15 hours, 2 to the town of Ulysses for about 8 hours, 1 to the town of Covert for also about 8 hours, none to Hector. There were 2 mutual aid calls, which were 19 hours, so it's a total of 50 call hours. There were 78 training hours. And so the total in-service calls for their year was 128, and the calls to date are 380. Year to date, this is always the fun one, right? Year to date in-service hours, 3,964. So strong and robust company. Had a good opportunity to catch up with Chief Taylor at Garrett's, and it's good. Things are going along really well there. TACC, I think that's the most. Well, actually, I'll just jump to Clio, which is at the end. They have an extremely dense newsletter that came out that lists a significant amount of grant awards that were given to the CUDA Cuyahoga County, to Cuyahoga County, and also Union Springs, and also to Interlaken, all in terms of water mitigation and preventing pollution and harmful algal blooms. And there's a lot of things that people might be interested in. For some reason, it was uploading strangely, so it may be in the Dropbox, but if it's not, I will resolve that at the end here.
I see it there.
Okay, but that was also me buying time to get my computer to open. So you should also see in there that I need to approve some funds to spend for ropes for the fire department, and I believe I named it, it's like 9B1. And you can see. Can you open it up and look at it? You can see that there was a quote for ropes. So the thing is, we'd like to approve up to 7,000 to spend because we're not sure what the freight will be. This is coming out of the ropes equipment budget line. So it's not a surprise in any way. It's just more than I can approve on my own. So does anyone have any questions about that expenditure? Okay, so if we can get, I can't remember the exact words that I was saying.
You would like to make a motion to spend up to $7,000 from the equipment line on the rope.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to spend up to $7,000 on the equipment line for rope, which Vicki, if you need me to quote, now that my computer's open, I can find it. Right?
That's okay.
Okay, got it.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Any discussion?
Just know that it's rope and equipment, right? That's
Yes, but primarily for that, yeah, related.
Any other questions, comments?
I'm very happy to see the fire department doing this.
Yeah.
I think it was a couple of years ago that also bought rope, but before that, I had never seen, and
Oh, really?
it's very reassuring that they seem to be on a regular cycle. It's,
Okay.
If there are no other questions, then all in favor of the purchase, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
And then Vicki, there appears to be an outstanding invoice that came to Matt from us for Zep.
I saw that in my email tonight. I will look at it tomorrow and get back to him. But we wouldn't be able to pay, we wouldn't have been able to pay it tonight.
Okay, but is there something that we have to, like, you just will make an adjustment and it's like a correction to, so it falls in the right budget year, however it is you handle that? It's for 12/01/2021, that's still.
Oh, that's still, that's still this budget year. So
It's still
that's-
okay. Okay.
Yeah,
because
we're
it's
good.
ours. So then
We're-
why was he, I'm not so sure why he was worried about it getting out
I
of here today.
think
Just
he
put it in
was just
front of
because
us.
it was December.
Okay. just
I'm
to
sure
get it in
that
front
was
of
it,
us.
but I'll talk to him tomorrow.
Okay, so did it, yeah, I will check again to see that that great document made it into the Dropbox. I think it did. From Cleo.
Yeah,
They did, it's 9B4. And we have a meeting on Wednesday, so if any of you do look at that and have specific questions, I can happily bring them up. And then the Trumansburg Area Chamber of Commerce, in conjunction with the Porch Fest Committee, is going to take on hosting and getting funds for a critical mass event at Porch Fest, which has been determined to be June 11th. And they conferred with Reggae Fest, which is happening on June 18th, and both groups are interested in cross promoting each other. So this is a great benefit, even though the date has shifted for us. And they will be promoting a main stage to host Sim Raymond as the Trumansburg band for celebrating 150th anniversary. The intention is to seek permission to close down Union Street and Dance in the Street as in days of yore. Which we talked about last meeting, but it's just this great notion of these are our good streets, we live in them, we use them, let's celebrate them. And let's also not try to close 96 because that is a big effort. Again, that is then not, we talked about it last meeting too, right? So it's not, that's not a village event, though we certainly will be talking about it happening. And so the intention is like 5 to 6:30 for that music. So if Porch Fest is 12 to 5, then the main stage action will happen at 5 and end at 6:30, and then people can go off and do whatever other village events.
What do you mean by it's not a village?
It will be hosted by, the stage will be hosted by the Trumansburg Area Chamber of Commerce and the Porch Fest Committee, so they can raise funds.
So we'll just need the chamber to fill out an event permit. So we can
Yeah.
close the road.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then also seek any assistance that we might need for public gathering, or they might need. And what did I say? I want to say, so we will continue to build out events Friday night and speak to the several businesses were very interested in participating from the chamber, things that could happen on Friday, things that could happen on Sunday. And then that's as far as we've gotten with ETC, and so grateful that Jen is going to join. So then we can sort of look at other things happening in the summer to say, would you also like to talk about the 150th? We had redressed banners last meeting, so I think that nothing's moved since then. We need to do that at the budget. We talked about it. I think that's it. That seems big. I thought that would take up more time. I was really excited. It takes up a lot of space in my head. 150th. Oh, I know one thing that there is a lot of excitement about getting cake, 150 cakes, having a cake wheel, also really having, seeing if we could pull off a group photo, that there was some time that there was a group photo. People missed it at Winterfest. And maybe one happened at the fairgrounds some other time, maybe before I was paying attention to such things.
1972.
So
That was before you were paying attention to me.
yeah, but as soon as that was brought up by just a constituent in the community, I was like, that sounds like a project you'd like to spearhead. But I think there's time, and if it was promoted, this is when it could happen. We get it probably around the stage time, people could just be there.
Probably, I can probably find a drone operator to donate time as well.
Can you? Okay, that would be outstanding.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah, so we see that without a lot of effort, we can build out and just get people connected. So let's see, also McGuire has reached out to see what events have been isolated on the village calendar because they are interested in taking a greater role in community activities. And so I will mention this Critical Mass event and Winterfest, and I don't think that we have any other unless I'm missing things. So if you think of things that I'm not right now, but I'll bring it to the chamber as well. Good. Questions? Comments, considerations? Did we say thank you, Jen Demarest, enough today? Okay.
And you'll reach out to her because I told her I was appointing her, but you can just reach out and say, welcome, here's your task list.
Great, thank you.
Okay, EMS Youth Street Tree Advisory.
So nothing on trees. The Youth Commission is working on putting together a needs assessment for the community. There's a big county survey that went out that's sort of being collected and prepared that we haven't received yet, but we're also putting together sort of a more abbreviated needs survey. So what do we see as gaps in services for youth in Trimsburg, Ulysses, and the school district specifically? For EMS, very happy to report that Joel is working along. He seems to have a real taste for establishing predictable policies, which is something that within the context of our EMS department in particular has been historically something of a struggle. So I'm very relieved to see that. He does a great job. We've been meeting weekly on Ben's recommendation, which I think is fantastic. That's been going really well, and so far, nothing but good things to report. For call numbers for last month, Covert 20, Hector 1, Mech 6, Village 19, Ulysses 21, and 3 Mutual Aid, which were all to South Seneca, and also 3 second calls, which we covered. So that is another development, is that Joel has designated his personal vehicle as a response unit. So he can take, and it is a New York State designation, so it doesn't actually change anything about his car. It just means that he can respond to dispatch to let him know that he's coming, or to let them know that he's coming, which allows him to then be a first responder as not as an ambulance, obviously, but so that's been really great. And I think that's really it, unless I'm forgetting something. Warren, do you want to share your EMS thoughts?
Do we need to approve stipends?
I was just going to talk about that in the executive session.
Okay. It's another EMS item in executive session. Yeah, I'll just mention I've been having some very fascinating conversations with a whole bunch of different interesting people over the last couple of weeks about EMS. So there's, I think I may have mentioned it before, and I think I mentioned it at State of the Village, but you know, for the 2 people who are watching on YouTube, we'll keep everyone up to speed. There is a bill in the Assembly that now has picked up 9 or 10 co-sponsors, including a couple of powerful, politically powerful committee chairs, introduced by Assemblymember Kellis. It's whatever they call it, sister bill in the Senate has been introduced by Senator Michelle Hinchy, only has 1 co-sponsor. So it's gaining some attention because it specifically would create a CHIPS modeled funding stream to municipalities who operate an EMS agency or contract with a municipality or a not-for-profit that provides EMS. I did some back of the napkin calculations because I found a place on the DOH website where we have roughly 2 million EMS calls a year statewide. That includes the city. So if we use $1,000 to $1,500 per call, you get a number of 2.5 to 3 billion as the total cost for EMS statewide, which is a big number, except when you think that it's only 1.5% of the entire state budget. So you would, I was about to say you'd be shocked, but maybe you wouldn't, at the amount of pushback that this bill has gotten from other Assembly folks who don't want to spend anything on this. Why should we spend money on that? If we just had Medicaid reimbursed more, it would cover the cost. I mean, there's a certain amount of just lack of understanding that should be added in, and they just don't know. They don't understand. They're not educated on it. So that effort continues. I want to thank Anna, thank Assemblymember Kellis for her unending passion for this issue now. She's taken it on as one of her several causes, and I'm glad she has. Had a nice conversation today with a village administrator, speaking of village administrators, from Rybrook, New York, down in Westchester. They have, they went the not-for-profit route. So they and 2 other municipalities many years ago formed a joint multi-municipal not-for-profit organization that supplies their EMS, and they contract with this not-for-profit. 3 ambulances, 1 fly car, 5,500 calls a year, but the budget is only 2.9 million, which I thought was interesting. So maybe it's, as we add that second rig, it's not doubling personnel costs. So it's something to think about. Their issues are not funding. It's Westchester. Their issues are staffing. So he and I had an interesting conversation. We don't have staffing issues now. We have financial issues. His issues are, it's only $800,000. It's easy to pay for our contribution. But our county dispatch has to make 15 mutual aid calls to find 1 ambulance to respond to a call now, because they have tremendous burnout, tremendous attrition. Their pay scale for paramedics down there is the same as ours. Now imagine trying to live in Westchester County on Tompkins County money.
I figured out their staffing issue.
Yeah, right.
And how the budget works.
Yeah. And so his point was, and he wrote a white paper that's fascinating, I can share it if anyone's interested, which is basically calling on New York State to do certain things. He says, which is strange for me, he said it's actually not the pay, it's that if it's a not-for-profit structure, they have no retirement system, and they don't have access to Empire Plan or any affordable health insurance. So
It's a benefit package.
so a family health insurance plan down there is $44,000.
Yeah.
The consortium is 18, right? So they have paramedics who are working for 3 different agencies with no health insurance. And so that's the problem. So it's interesting to hear, and he and I talked about this a little bit. It's interesting to hear how all areas are discovering that there's a real problem with EMS, even though their individual issues may be different. They're all saying we have this issue and we have this problem. And one of the people on the assembly floor last week, who Assemblymember Kellis was arguing or was debating with, was saying, why do we need to put EMS funding in? We haven't heard a groundswell of support for this. It's not a crisis. So I'm hoping, his name is Chris, I told Chris we should stay in touch, I forwarded him the CEQA report. Just so that we can try to generate the amount of awareness that I think is going to be necessary to get some movement on that, so we'll see. That's one of many phone conversations about EMS in the last few days. But yeah, the rest is executive session material. So let's move on. DPW, water, sewer, CPZR, and farmers market.
All right, hold on. Let's start with DPW, water and sewer. Matt McKenna is here from MRB. I'll cover a couple of things real quick before we get to that part. Just some quick updates. We mentioned the water rate study last week during budget meeting. Continue to work through that. The last I heard was they're going to revisit that this week and get back to me around what the split is between that base rate and that per 1,000 gallon rate on top. But otherwise, having thought through it more, generally like the whole structure of where it's going, I think it basically makes sense. I'm just curious to see where they come back with this kind of guidance. So let's take a second look at that and what makes the most sense. We've talked about a sewer law update, which is at this point the wording and the law is finalized. The last part I was waiting for was a draft letter from MRB, which I received today, for notifying businesses in the village that will need to have grease traps installed if they don't already have them, based on the new sewer law. That is a problem. There is grease issues in the sewer. It needs to get looked at. Unfortunately, based on this geography and the narrowness of some of the Main Street properties, it may be difficult to install grease traps where you most want them or most easily put them if they're not already there. So the letter is an idea towards notifying businesses that this is coming down the pipe, asking them to return a short survey. It's like 3 questions of like, do you have one? Do you know, do you not know? That sort of like basic information that can then help us kind of start a conversation with any of the businesses that might need to sort out a longer term kind of glide path into that. So I'll start working with Tammy on that shortly here to get those out, and we can kind of take it from there. So moving into water and sewer capital planning and capital projects, there is a finalized water and sewer capital plan in Dropbox for people to take a look at. No need to kind of dive deep right now per se, but that is at this point I think all but finalized or maybe considered final. There's a lot in there. I don't know if it's worth really spending all your time in there, but there's just a lot in there. The most interesting parts might be towards the end, where we kind of walk through those detail here to put back to Mark, but where it kind of walks through a year by year grid of the different projects that are called out and how much money it gets those in each year, what's the total, and so on and so forth. There is a particularly large chunk in 2025, which is a large water capital project. So that's the next part of mostly what I wanted to have Matt come and talk to us about, though. Matt, if you wanted to point out anything about the capital plan project document, that'd be great as well. But the point is that there's a number of issues in the water capital plan that MRB has identified, ranging from some improvements at the Frontenac well, which was left generally untouched in the last capital plan, and including booster pump station as that comes up the hill back up to the village. There's a discussion about additional booster pump improvements at the DPW station with the office space. There's also a pump house there. Formally decommissioning the Hoffmeyer well, which at this point we don't have a need for, would be probably unusable even if we tried. As well as a couple other small pieces that need to be looked at and addressed. So the the proposal, the engineering study proposal that's also in the Dropbox, that I can Matt talk to in a minute, is doing the planning and study to work up to applying for grants this June, for looking at actually potentially getting those next year. So it's kind of a long runway, and it's a little bit of a fast moving piece right now. But the hope is to, get our ducks in a row and be able to apply for grants this year and see if we can't land those next year, and then kind of move into applying, getting that work actually happening kind of as soon as grant funding cycles allow us. Maybe that's 2025, maybe that's a different time depending on how it all lands. So I guess at this point, Matt, if you want to jump in on either parts about the planning, the capital plan itself, or the engineering study piece.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks everyone for having me. So really, we've been working with the village through the draft of the document for the capital plan. It started with the site visit with DPW. We walked through each of the components of the water system, the parks, took a look at what was performed back in 2016 as part of that project, and then also went back and revisited a lot of the existing infrastructure, the Frontenac Well, Roadhouse, down by Camp Barton, the Route 89 booster pump station, went into the village to the elevated storage tank, as well as the DPW booster pump station, which provides water flow and pressure to the northwest corner, I would say, of the village up towards Seneca Road. And documented conditions from, pump condition, piping and valves, electrical service, and really got some good input from the village staff who operate the systems daily, to get their feedback on how things are going, what improvements they would like to see, and just general rehab and rehabilitation needs for those facilities. Also touched and looked at the sewer system and mostly the treatment plant. That side of things seems to be in pretty good shape, as that had a very comprehensive improvement project. So that facility is still operating in good condition. Whereas the water system, which has been alluded to, the 2016 project really focused on getting another source to the village. It didn't really dive into a lot of the existing infrastructure. So that's really where the comprehensive plan is focused on. A lot of time has been spent with Ben, Dusty, and Rorden. And that's resulted in, through discussions, that there was probably a handful of big ticket items, I'd say, that'd be difficult for the village to plan for on an annual basis to get completed timely and successfully. So with the grant programs that are available and the funding programs and the potential federal infrastructure, it was kind of discussed that looking at completing an engineering report that would look at the rehab and rehabilitation of a lot of the existing water system components, to get it included on the IUP, or the intended use plan. It would be good for the village to do that now, see where the project scores, see what grant opportunities are come for you. And if nothing happens this year, you're still in the queue for years moving forward. So there's good benefit on trying to get this done, knowing what's forthcoming from the federal government as well as the state and the programs that are currently available. I can take any questions there as a brief pause.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. No, in one of those meetings, as Matt mentioned, we were looking at a list of items that needed to be addressed over time, and MRB actually had it spread out over the course of a few years. And what do we apply for grants, and what do we reserve for? And in the course of conversation, it came up that, well, why don't we stack it and apply for it? If we apply for it and get it all, great. If we don't get any of it, then go back to the original plan and spread it out over a bunch of years. But to get an engineering report done in 22 means we can start applying for grants anytime as they become available. Most of those grants will have something like a 9-month to 15-month window of award cycle, so we're not starting too soon to be able to be working actual construction work in 2024 and 2025. That's seems like a long way away, but it's not in the infrastructure grant process. So. Any questions or thoughts on MRV's proposal?
That seems comprehensive.
It's almost too bad we didn't start the GIS mapping earlier, because that would probably go pretty well with the grant applications. But strategically, it sounds to me. I mean, why not?
Yeah, to the GIS point, that is something I'm talking with Dusty about, at least getting the software in place this year. It keeps coming up in every conversation, and it's not one of those things that we're gonna just like turn it on and have all the maps and all the everything there tomorrow. So we need to get the software there, we need to start adding data into it. It is gonna be a longer piece, but it's gonna become more and more important. One of the things that came out of the capital plan document was, you know, the idea of say 10 years or so out, do we need to start looking at more systemic replacement of water mains or sewer mains, these sorts of things? It's a conversation that keeps coming up. Well, we need that to be driven by data, and the way to start doing that is to start mapping things and creating like actually water plans, like pressure studies and plans of like where are things actually at, so we can really make a decision rather than, yeah, put your finger in the air and decide, let's go replace this stretch or that stretch. So if this seems reasonable to folks, I guess I would make a motion then that we approve, we authorize Gordon to sign and accept the proposal from MLB for preliminary engineering report for the water system.
Second. Any additional conversation, questions, comments? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
Actually, before you
Okay,
Matt,
don't
real
go
quick.
anywhere.
Yeah, one more. I'm just gonna foreshadow, the one other thing I'm talking to MRB as of today now is, a stormwater comprehensive plan as well. And so having a chat with Matt today and see if we might, that we received a proposal for a plan in January of 2020, and there was something that happened that year. We didn't quite get to it.
Weird.
I don't
It's like
know.
something-
Yeah.
I keep forgetting.
And but you know, especially with the recent water and melt and rain and so forth that we've been experiencing, I have an inbox full of emails from different residents, and they've been talking Dusty's ear off, and really it's not a problem that's going to go away on its own. So I asked Matt to kind of take another look at that and update numbers as things have changed over the past couple of years, and maybe look at ways of, you know, kind of breaking into the two chunks, so we can maybe do a chunk this year and a chunk next year, sort of thing. So that's still being discussed and something to bring back here. I'm trying to get numbers early enough that we can kind of keep in mind for the budget, make sure there's a little room in there for that sort of thing. But I do think it's something the time has come to start actually looking more comprehensively at what he's doing and having a plan there that we could start executing against.
Matt, where you could be helpful, so I was supposed to have a meeting with Caitlin Olson, the Ulysses Town Supervisor today. It got pushed off till tomorrow, but one of the things I'm going to mention to her is they're looking at the likelihood of doing a townwide water study, primarily for drinking water needs, but they do also want to address what is the state of stormwater management in the town. Most of the worst areas of the village, as you know, from a drainage perspective, are on private property. So we may not spend taxpayer dollars on private property infrastructure. However, I think the one out to that would be if it was a joint village town project where easements were put into place then possibly we could run drainage to creeks and whatnot. Might need county soil and water involved. You know, so the broader we make it, the more wiggle room we might have to spend grant money on what would be municipal infrastructure via easement on private property. But that's a big undertaking because most of the work, most of the actual work would have to be done in the town. So I'm going to talk to Caitlin about that. Keep that on your radar. I think they're a year away from even starting a stormwater management study, so that doesn't help us from a time frame perspective. But I'll talk to her and see if there's a way to integrate it a little bit.
Yeah, and just to give you a heads up, we're meeting internally on the 23rd. So if you want to try and, you know, follow up on your conversation or whatever it may be, we can even have a call, whether it's with Trumansburg or Trumansburg and Ulysses. We'd also offer to come down and meet with in person with one, both, or the other. So just keep us posted. It's on our radar. I would say since 2020, we do know a whole lot more of stormwater issues within the village. You know, we've been able to go out and walk Seneca Road with residents, you folks, DPW. So the more information that trickles in, the more we can get a better desktop understanding of conditions, and it's helpful for what's been provided from those residents. So thank you there.
Yeah, I mean, the north end of the village where we were a few months ago, Matt, that's tricky because that's a different county.
Right.
South end of the village would be something we could work on with Ulysses for sure. So
sure, understood.
Let's see if we can find some synergies of some kind.
Yeah, and the other thing we're into, you know, just keep on our radar. I know, I believe Cuba Lake's under a TMDL, a total maximum daily load, with the intent to reduce nutrients to the lake. That may provide opportunities specifically with surface water runoff, stormwater runoff, that there may be grant dollars looking at eliminating the nutrient loading to Cuba Lake.
Just a point, if anyone's watching at home or now or later, you know, as stormwater becomes an issue, as melt continues and rains in spring and so forth. Absolutely, there's now a stormwater page on the village website, and there's some directions there on how to send pictures and experience reports and so forth to the village that we can then pass along to MRB, and that's just been helpful. Just to keep collecting information, just helps get a better picture of what's actually happening in the village. All right, that is it for the DPW water sewer piece. So, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate your hanging out the whole time for those 10 minutes.
Not a problem, Rory. I appreciate everyone having me. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll briefly cover CPCR, just to say our next meeting is on Thursday. Continue to do what we're doing, walking through the last bits of Article 7 around residential parts there. We started digging deeper into the definitions as well to get those in good working order, so we can line that up with our timeline of trying to get something done the first half of the year. The other piece on here is the farmers market. So they're continuing to work through their opening season. Sounds like things are going well there. But I did get a request from Debbie at the market asking that the market would like to hang banners for the new sign. So there's that new wood frame sign. They've got an idea of some flag or banner sort of thing coming off of that.
To ad sponsor something.
Yeah. To kind of display whatever flags, banners they would like there. My immediate thought went to the flag policy, which I directed Debbie to. And sure enough, the flag policy does say that it should apply to all flags, banners, signs, and plaques, and similar traditional display devices. The flags that they're talking about are not a couple of flags that we have in our flag policy. And so I kind of initially said, you know, if it's one of these flags, we could do it. If not, no. And then in discussing it more in depth, the conversation of, well, there's banners up on the flagpole, up on the light poles, how does that work in? So on and so forth, which brought me back to talking to Guy, and many emails later, decided I would take a pause and come back here to figure out if and when we want to open up this Pandora's box. My thought is, and there might be other approaches too, but my thought kind of falls into one of two camps, is coming up with a response to the market and saying kind of yay or nay as just they already put a sign up, they want to hang some things on it, it's there, and kind of kicking this larger puzzle down the road that it seems like we're half in already and haven't really sorted it out yet. And so why make today that day? Or we can kind of take a step back and think a little more broadly, and I can dance with guys some more and see if there's a way to come up with like what would a policy look like that would apply towards banners and signs and things that are not flags in the village that we may want to hang up somewhere. I don't even begin to pretend to know what that looks like.
Well, what are these banners? I mean, or these flags?
They wanted to hang some flagging or banners and whatnot that would promote the inclusivity of the market. So like a quality flag of some sort. They're not like a standard.
It's not like live music now, fresh food, something to just have movement, but highlight that something's happening. It's their political statements.
Depends on what you wanted to define a political statement, but it felt odd enough that I wanted. I mean, I don't know.
Because it isn't live music today.
It was not purely
It's not about the
informational.
offer,
It's not like
right.
It's not like a time and place or a name of who's playing this week.
Because I think it is interesting, and I think we do have some zoning around event banners. In fact, I know we do, like where you can hang them, what size they can be and how long.
And that is in itself completely different than what the village does as a village committee, that the village market is on village property.
Yeah, and again, it's not happening this week or happening in 2 weeks. It's inclusion statements.
So my inclination would be to say that we have essentially given them discretion. So we granted permission to put up a framework, right? That houses the sign. And I would consider this an extension of that, which is maybe just a cheap way to dodge the question and kick the can. And to me, this is not something that justifies reevaluating our entire, I don't want to spend hours and hours of guys' time evaluating whether or not we hang different sort of flagging every possible situation where we can put a flag. There's a point that you just draw a line. So I would say we've granted them discretion in terms of what they fill that sign with, right? Like they're gonna write it, it's a chalkboard. So if they hang something else on the inside, I would consider that the same.
So let me play the devil's advocate of that.
Yeah.
It's an easy thing to do.
It's not a stretch. There is a sign out in front of the fire department.
Right.
Which the fire company uses to advertise their events. I can easily imagine a flag or potentially patriotic in nature that could end up on that sign that I think some village residents might not find as patriotic as some fire company members might. It's village property. So how much of this, the department has a signboard? Because the farmer's market technically is a department. The department has a signboard so they can.
I mean, to me, it's okay until it's not. If at some point there's a line that's crossed, and it's like, all right, we have to reevaluate this. We do. I'm not sure that we granted them discretion explicitly.
The fire company bought the sign.
Yeah, but I mean, officially, I don't think we've taken action to prove that.
Yeah, I don't want to be the one to say that. I would say that meeting with the fire company.
Oh, I'm not saying, no, what I'm saying is that if we can assume, we can sort of assume everyone has.
So I'm just going to channel, I'm going to share the Cliff Notes guys 4,000 word response. The minute you allow discretionary placement of anything on village property, you immediately have a First Amendment issue the next time someone places something you don't like.
Yeah.
Period. And essentially you guys, I mean, my words, not guys, but channeling this interpretation correctly, if you read it differently, you will lose that federal lawsuit. Period.
Truly, there's a like for like situation, right? Like by granting the possibility that we can. Right, that's fine. If our lawyer says we should be ridiculous, I will see the point and we can be ridiculous. I just also feel that it's necessary to point out that it is ridiculous that we're.
Right, I mean, I think I'm very much where you are, I think, which is that we will lose that lawsuit. The question is, at what point do we think we're gonna step into a place where we have to deal with that? Like, I think we can kind of be a little bit, I don't know, just put our head in the sand a little bit on some things and say, up until this point becomes an issue, up until this becomes an actual issue, and there is, you know, we're starting to get into lawsuit territory. That's when everything, we have to kind of take a step back and like actually create a policy. It does mean we're playing fast and loose. It does mean we're potentially opening ourselves up to a lawsuit. I think the question is the farmer's market putting a flag on? Is that the thing that's going to cause someone to come in, say, now I want you to put my flag, and maybe we don't want that flag?
I want to challenge the notion of flags versus mission statements of inclusion. And I want to bring to a point that we talked about the sign that is in existence, and we had design approval because it speaks to the village, it's village property. So suddenly to just discretionarily change what that looks like by flags that you might think make sense but are not related to your actual activity is confusing to me, and I would automatically just be like, no, nor do we want to get into design approval for every flag or banner all the time. Although actually, no, we might. So anyway, but they
We
could,
definitely are.
but they have a chalkboard, as you pointed out. And if the farmer's market in its mission is to be a market for all, exclusive to none, why would they not simply scrawl that on the chalkboard? And they've made their statement and they're within the design parameters. And so I'm saying there may be other people with logos that are expressing your sentiment that speak to a broader cause, but if you have the same sentiment as that cause and it's in your mission, then use your logo to say that to people in the sign that you already have. Does that make sense? Or at least, am I coherent?
I think it makes sense to some degree, but I don't think at any point we dictated the contents of the chalkboard.
No, exactly what I'm
Right?
saying.
Like there's,
We haven't dictated the contents of the chalkboard. But adding a flag onto it is changing the sign fundamentally. It's not a sign with flags.
Well, I think one of Guy's point, and to be clear, I really don't have a strong leaning either way on this particular issue. The risk manager in me is cringing and hiding in a corner because the First Amendment issues are massive. And I actually think as much fun as it is, as much as Ben doesn't want to spend the next 500,000 words going back and forth with Guy, I actually think reevaluating the policy to include signage and what's approved and what can be placed, what can be said, what can be written in chalk is the safer way to go. Now,
Yeah.
maybe we don't want to spend time on it. But
Well,
again,
I think there's no doubt it's the safer way. I think there's like, it's trying to find that balance of when is it, how in the weeds do we get versus when do we think we've gotten enough of the risk kind of mitigated. I think clearly flying an arbitrary flag on the flagpole on the village hall would seem to, which was our initial issue, and it seems to be the most prominent display of where you could get into trouble. I think it seems less likely to have, but your analogy of the fire department
Yes, right.
is very apt, right?
You can't presume that everyone in the community has the sentiment that you're expressing on that flag. And you could very easily fall on the other side of that.
I mean, I think the other way, which I'm actually not opposed to it anyway, is just say no to the flag and to the farmer's market approach. You just say like, this is too big of a can of worms. It's not worth it. We just like, they already have the board, to your point. They can say what they want to say on the board, which in and of itself is still many of the same issues, but it just seems like a less egregious version of the issue that's less likely to kind of raise the ire of risk that we might run into.
I would say the answer or the question is whether we say no or whether we just let them do it. I think reevaluating our whole plan just seems unnecessary, right? And if it's going to be an issue every time we do something small like this, and we end up having to dedicate 30 minutes to every small, it begins to be absurd fairly. I mean, at this point already, it feels kind of like, what are we doing?
I mean, I'm there, I'm sort of in the, we approved a design presentation on your sign, that's been approved. You're now submitting a reapproval by adding flag posts or however you want to hang banners from it. So even on that issue alone is like, well, what do you want to do? What is that all about? And then if the content of that is signs that are things that don't fit within our existing flag policy, then the answer is already no. That's,
Yeah,
Agree for different reasons.
yeah.
the only thing that kind of, I think the reason I came back here was this idea, we do have these banners that we put on Main Street, and it seems that I'm having a hard time making a distinction between that and,
The banners that say farmers market.
or whatever they say, right?
Well,
We,
well, that's-
we accept,
Those are like advertisements, not political statements in any way, shape or form, or religious statements or.
right, but we still say we have a policy that mandates what banners can be placed, and there's a list of things, and it's not any of the things that's up. Like, we don't have in our banner policy that you can put market signs on. And you might be right.
No,
You might-
they're events, look at those events. The event of graduation, the event of market season, the event of winter season, the event of the 150th celebration, or simply saying, welcome to Trumansburg.
I think Ben's point is that we are already making an exception to the existing flag policy by doing that.
By doing that. Oh, okay.
I think you're not wrong in the way you're like segmenting it. I'm not sure that's a legal definition.
I vote no. I mean, sincerely, no flag.
Yeah, I vote no for this.
I think I'll know. I mean, that's only two. but
Also,
I
and
think I do
apologies,
that way.
but
Yeah,
also.
I have been very clear the whole way through that this was a can of worms and it was likely not gonna be a thing, but I'm very happy to go back and say no. And come up with other ingenious ways of.
Well, also, if Ben is voting no with apologies, I'll vote no with encouragement that if they would like to review it and suggest alterations and start a conversation and want to be part of reframing the policy, that, you know, that's part of civic engagement. I'm not saying it's gonna come anytime soon. but,
Right.
They're part of it.
I mean, I think they honestly,
To do that.
they've done a decent job at that. I think Debbie has, did her homework, read the policy, suggested, pointed out the incongruity between, like, you have banners on the side of this road, how is this different, how does this apply? I think the problem is that it is a large amount of guy time to figure out something that's any better. And I worry that the result is there isn't any better, then, like, I don't know where we go with street banners.
Now I'm worried about banners.
Exactly.
Which we should be, I guess.
Maybe we should be, but I'm kind of of the opinion of no, and carry on doing what we've already been doing forever, and if that then becomes a problem, we can deal with that down the road.
I would be curious to know what Guy's view of the stakes are. Like, if we had this lawsuit that we then lose, what does that mean? Like, who cares, right? Why do we care that we lose that lawsuit? Do we just have to hang a bunch of flags until we create a new policy? Or is it like,
That's a 5,000 word answer.
I know it is.
I follow you all the time. I read an email like, clearly obviously this must be a small, quick answer.
I am meeting with him tomorrow, but I will not be bringing this up.
Don't bring it.
Because I do have other appointments.
All right, I will let the farmers market know that we will not be approving that, and they can sort out how they're going to move forward.
And also, I think that I would say that in my mind, that definitely I should explore what our policy is on banners as decoration. And what the content of those can be and how that. makes sense, so that it is fair. I mean, it's important to.
I think the one thing I've heard coming back from Guy pretty consistently is if you can have all sorts of design standards, sizing, colors, shapes, whatever. Content is the problem.
Yeah.
As soon as you start regulating content, that's where things go awry. So if there's an interest in banner guidelines that are more about the shape and size and the when and the where and the who and the when and the where or whatever, but not the actual content.
Okay.
That would be interesting. But I'll leave that to your discretion. All right, well, with that, diversion, that's my report.
Okay. Police, Keith. Unless you had any comments on farmer's market banners.
I did. I used to raise my hand so I didn't interrupt anybody, but I think
That's why I didn't see it.
I think you've all hashed it out. So it's I just will withhold opinion at this point.
Save
But
yourself. Keith. Save
what's
yourself.
that?
Save yourself.
I didn't hear. I'm sorry. I can't hear that.
Never mind, never mind.
All right,
Trying to make it go.
on to you for police.
Police report is very quick, which is probably good for tonight. And now it just disappeared. Oh, come on. Sorry, I'll get it. Okay. Nope, that's not it. Oh my God.
16 character passing.
I do have my thoughts on IT.
Okay. February report, 243 calls for service. 4 calls outside the village. 1 larceny theft, a couple domestic disputes, a harassment, and a fraud. No major other incidences. Do want to publicly thank Chief Nelson for being up late a couple Sundays ago, helping out the school district with that threat that everyone got a message about. So that's not a fun way to spend a late Sunday night. There's a lot of back and forth there. So thank him for being up late, working with the school district and other parties to get to the bottom of what happened. It's nice to have a local department that can get on top of that stuff pretty quickly to rule out threats like that try to pop up. So just want to thank him for that. Still looking for a PM crossing guard if anyone's interested in that part-time job. No budgetary items to discuss. Will be, I think, next week. I'm going to meet up on Main Street again with Phil from TCAT to kind of discuss with him his report in person and then give him some of the feedback we had recently when we talked about the issue.
When are you meeting with him, Keith?
We don't have the exact date yet. It's going to be, he's requested a 3 p.m. meeting. Like I said, it should be one day next week. And I kind of went back to him with not only our discussion points, but also the talk of a larger collaboration to put more pressure on the state to help us with some of these issues. So
let me know when that is. I might sneak over.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The feeling being that if we can maybe collaborate on a bigger request together, maybe we get a little bit more traction on how to make some changes to Main Street without giving up the much needed parking spots. So more on that after we all meet with him next week. That's it.
Great. Any questions for Keith on police? All right, Treasurer Vicky.
I'd like to ask the board if we can close and transfer 2 of our checking accounts to reserve accounts. It would be the capital project account, which is the Safe Routes School, and we would deposit that into the sidewalk reserve, and the capital project water well which now after hearing that, I don't know if you want to close that. And that would go into the debt reserve account for water, and that has 20,857,
What's in the safe routes to school?
30,851.
Vicki, would you repeat for me the water well balance, please?
20,857.
Thank you.
But after this meeting, I don't know whether you want to
It's
do.
not a water well project.
Oh, okay,
It's CFC money. For the
right,
water well, the Vacancy project.
okay,
Yeah, I don't see any reason not to do that.
okay.
Water well would go to where?
The debt reserve
Okay,
in water,
that's correct. And then the safe routes would go to,
the sidewalk reserve account. And we're using some of that in the budget.
see, I think that safe routes money has to go to debt service on the sidewalk. If we put it in sidewalk reserve, we could use it for anything sidewalk related.
I have to check, but I think that we can use this money for any of your sidewalk projects.
I think I need to check on that, because
Okay,
that grant funding was specific to Lake Street, South Street, and the stretch to the Jersey.
okay, but we're using some of that in the budget, aren't we? Anyway,
That's the old sidewalk ban.
right. Which will be paid off next year. I
The
believe.
sidewalk ban is being used for debt service. I don't believe we can transfer the safe routes to school money. I could be wrong, but I don't think we can transfer the safe routes to school dollars into the sidewalk reserve. Because the sidewalk reserve could be used for things other than debt service.
Okay, so I can't remember, General, because we did it a few weeks ago, but were we not using money in general?
From the sidewalk, the other sidewalk ban.
From the sidewalk ban, which I thought was this.
No. Because the sidewalk ban we've been using over the last few years.
So this is the reserve account, right? No,
We'll go.
Oh,
So let's
okay,
not make any
alright.
change on that yet.
okay, well, do you want to just do the water well one then?
Sure. we can do that.
Okay, okay. Because I'm confused. So anyway, I would like the board's permission to close the water well.
So if this is the sidewalk ban, we're using it.
Yes,
You can't transfer it into the reserve.
well, I was gonna transfer it into the reserve until we get to this budget.
Can't, because when you transfer it into the reserve,
Then I
the
have
only
to
reason
do
you can
that.
spend it on that line is because we're using it for debt service.
Okay,
Once you transfer it into the reserve, it can be used for something else. We can't do that.
okay, I get that.
Plus, we need a permissive referendum to get it out.
Okay, so we would wait for this until June.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, that's fine. So I guess I just need from the board just to close the water well one now. And we'll wait until June to discuss the safe routes to school one.
So I would entertain a motion to transfer the balance of the water well capital project fund
Oops, sorry.
into
Debt reserve.
water debt reserve account.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Any opposed? Yes.
The only other thing I had was just getting people adjusted to my 20 hours a week. And so far, so good. I gotta say that. So far, so good. They've been very patient. So that's it. I mean, there's other things, but nothing important.
Any questions for Vicki? Okay, clerk, Tammy. What do you got?
Hi, everyone. So for not really February, but for March, it was the worst water sewer billing period in the history of my 17 years. We had a major file corruption happen with the software, not my Williamson, but the Badger software, and our bills did not get out until March 7th. So I am working with our rep, our Badger rep, to make sure that that never happens again. In the meantime, with permission from Warden, we did extend the due date out for folks. So those bills that would have been due at the end of March are now due on April 7th without penalty. Let's see, so the last few weeks I've been doing some digging about third-party utility billing companies that are out there. We've received one quote from one company. I've done a demo and I'm expecting a quote from another. And then when I get back from vacation, I have another demo set up with Opus 21. So I'm sure we'll be talking about that in the next coming couple of months. Seems like I've been doing a lot of tax searches and a lot of planning and zoning board meetings, lots of public hearings and notices going on. So that's kind of what I've been doing while this meeting's been going on. I've been multitasking, trying to get everything ready for a planning board next week that has 2 public hearings. So I've been doing that. That's why my camera's been off. So vacation, I leave tomorrow. I'm back in the office on Monday, the 28th. Everything will be fine. I published the budget notice for the April 11th meeting along with the organizational agenda. So that is all taken care of before I leave. I know that I have at least one outstanding thing with Trustee Darfler. I just wanted to give everybody a chance to let me know if you're missing anything before I hopefully get on a plane and fly south tomorrow. And I think that was pretty much it, except for, as Vicky said, trying to adjust to Vicky's 20 hours a week. So far, so good.
Okay, any questions for Tammy? Okay, old business. What are we talking about? The open container. All right, old business. The open container law is in the Dropbox, I believe.
It is.
And remind me, somebody, why we're talking about the open container law. Outdoor seating, is that what it is?
Yeah, but I don't know who brought this up.
Tom had brought it up by email.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, so Tom had brought it up by email when we originally adopted this back in 2015. There was concern about allowing for consumption of alcohol on sidewalks outside.
I think it was also during mealtime was the other part.
Right, so we made a concession in 2015 to say that we would allow it, but only as part of, only during hours. In fact, I think we even said.
So during meal service.
During meal service.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure, no one, I'm not aware that a business has asked us to revisit this at this point. But here we are.
Right, I think I had seen Tom's email and kind of added my approval to the idea of revisiting the meal service piece, just because I can imagine Garrett's wanting to have outdoor seating and then not having meal service, to my knowledge. I don't see a particular reason to restrict table service on the sidewalk to meal service. So yes, I haven't taken the time to actually chat with them or heard, not to my knowledge, we've heard any businesses looking for it specifically, but I'd be interested in removing that section or that kind of stipulation, saying maybe at outdoor seating during hours determined by the board, and just leave it at that.
I also thought the other reason this was on here is that we had waived the requirement for like the sketch plan and all of that for during the pandemic. And then, but was there, what is the status of that? Because I thought that was sunsetting and we needed to renew or something, but I don't see any of that in this.
So the other thing I remember talking about before, which is still confusing to me, is that you know, in order to be covered by your liquor liability, you have to identify all the spaces that you would be serving alcohol. So, for example, right, so the village could then say, no, you know, we're approved. So there's already sort of a sketch. It seems like that's already out there, but you could say, yeah, that's great that you have submitted that to the VATF and they say it's okay, but we're saying it needs to be smaller. So I guess maybe it's good to have village control of being able to say, we don't want you to use that much of the
I'll do
street.
the ABC board.
Did I say VATF?
The VATF would be a whole other.
So like, ask liquor permission, that's for New York State, to be a walk farm or a brewery. So anyway,
Yeah, I'm fine with whatever. I think Garrett's has plans for something different other than outdoor seating if construction costs and garage door prices ever come down. Atlas's plans are out back, so that's not a public byway issue. So this is really only a village property sidewalk issue. If you want to amend the law and go that route, we certainly can. I don't have an issue with it. The waiving of the fees was something we specifically did for that season, so we don't have to sunset it. It's back to the normal. Right.
I mean, I would say that with a brewery and being in the heart of wine country, I think the notion of a meal service is antiquated and strange.
I'm happy to open it up. I also think we should waive the fees again.
Sure. Clearly recognizing it is a privilege and it can be revoked if those areas are abused.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll pull up the
Of the outdoor seating.
Word doc.
It was abused pretty poorly a couple of years ago. And we did not.
Oh, it did.
Yeah, there was a couple issues.
Yeah, they weren't allowed to have outdoor seating.
I think we revoked it.
No. I wasn't on the board then, sir, so I'm speaking out.
I
of turn.
will,
They've been a-
I'll pull up the Word doc from 2015 of the open container law and send it around for edits.
Okay.
And we'll, with much fear and trembling, run it by Guy. Anything else for old business?
Should us keep us in
For
order.
new business, I want to rename Main Street Bourbon Street. Just kidding.
Are there any items of new business?
Not on my part.
All right. Second public comment period. Hi. How are you? Long time no see.
I was late because we were attending the Colbert Town Board to
Oh.
see, hear their discussion of the MOU. So we missed your discussion of the MOU for Camp Barton. And I know you don't usually respond during privilege of the floor, but could you tell us if
Oh, I love to respond.
if you supported that MOU?
We passed the MOU and the resolution unanimously
Great,
with very little discussion.
great.
I imagine it was very different than COVID.
Do you have a report for us from the Clover Town Board meeting?
It passed 3-2.
Interesting.
With a lot of discussion, so it really, you almost didn't pass, but it passed 3-2.
Any highlights from the discussion that you care to share, or would you rather not
I'll talk to you.
report?
Later.
I'm just curious how
What
I
if they
could.
live stream their meeting?
They certainly.
Yeah, they did. They were concerned about the cost. It was reiterated to them by their attorney, there was no cost associated in the terms that you're agreeing to. Another person in the public spoke to them and shared more information that had been at the meeting with the 3 municipalities and what the responsibility should be. They wanted to change the language in the MOU. The attorney advised that they not, he advised that it would be in the town's best interest to be part of this agreement because the land is in their town and to have a voice in what would happen in the future. They wanted the MOU to be more specific. The attorney advised them that this agreement was written by attorneys And I spoke to the issue that, as did Ms. Sender, that, and Ms. Nockley, that the Parks wants Spartan to be successful. I pointed out that they have 100% success rate already with 3 other municipalities, and they have a 0% failure rate. And that it was their duty to represent us and the property that is in the town of Colbert, because we live part-time in the town of Colbert, and that I expected them to represent my voice as well as another person there that was speaking against Camp Barton. That was their responsibility. So that, I think, changed one vote so that it did pass. So.
Great, thank you.
Well, I would have lost that bet. I will say. Well, that's great though. That's good
Yeah,
news.
it was good. So we wanted to come and just hear what you had said.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to make you wait so
Thought
long.
we were close.
Sorry to make you-
8:35.
Sorry to make you wait so long.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's good. We will, I'm meeting with Caitlin tomorrow to talk about a couple things, this included, so I'll let her know that Covert is in. It's good. Yeah, it's almost like State Parks knows how to run state parks.
Right.
But I appreciate hearing concerns because there's always something to consider, right?
Right, and that's what the attorney was trying to have them understand, that this gets you to the next step. We
Where
have
you
more of
can-
a voice
yeah.
about how it will be managed. Their concern was spending tax dollars, but they didn't know what that cost would be.
Right.
And he said, nobody does, and that's not what the agreement is about.
Right.
So,
Good, thank you.
so I'm just
Okay.
glad to see you all.
Great.
Unanimously.
Yeah.
And the town likely will be.
They did last
They
week
did,
Okay.
yeah, Mary, for sure.
unanimously as well,
Okay,
for Ulysses. Well, 4-0. They had an absent board member who is supportive to the best of my knowledge.
so going forward, now that there's 3 municipalities involved in decision making, will it be a majority vote for decisions or consensus?
So what the next step is, let Fred know that all 3 municipalities are in. That begins the process of negotiations between this working group, which we made up of at least 1, but possibly 2 representatives of each of the 3 municipalities. We'll have to, I don't know what happens if 2 of the 3 municipalities want something that the 3rd doesn't. We're gonna have to figure that part out. And then the negotiation is to create an operating agreement between parks and the municipalities. That agreement will eventually have to come back to all 3 boards. And if the terms of that agreement, however it's constructed, are not acceptable to any of the 3 boards, then they can vote not to sign it.
That's what the attorney shared with them.
It's the
Yeah.
They
old-
have the option to withdraw
Right.
in the future, but they should be part of this discussion going forward.
You know, it's the old constitutional principle of no board can bind a future board, so none of us are bound now to sign the operating agreement with parks if for some reason we don't like the content of it. So that's good. I'm glad they'll be participating, and we'll have to figure out how we will. It's gonna be interesting.
Well, I think that's a bit of the solution in itself, that it seems like 2 or 1 of the boards isn't interested in kind of where the other boards are going or something like that, and that's kind of the opportunity is to create an agreement that one of the boards isn't interested in signing, and that might be well as it is.
I appreciated the input from the town of Covert when the 3 municipalities gathered them. I thought they were very engaged and raised good points, and so I'm glad to see it coming through.
No, it's gonna be, and that's the reason why, that's the reason why it takes time. I mean, it's gonna be, I'm gonna say optimistically 12 to 15 months, probably, before we have something in place. That's good. That's the next step. You can only ever take the next step, right?
Right. Well, that's what we've convinced them.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Joe. Have a good night. Great. Any other, while you're here?
No, that's it. That's it.
All right, well, thank you. That's good news.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's.
Sure.
Thanks for
Yeah, on my mind for one.
Well, I did appreciate your comments, and we've been away the last 5 weeks, we came back to that. And your comments at the meeting about preserving the land. I really would like to see that, be at the forefront of any decision that is made. The Boy Scouts had signed an agreement with the Environmental Protection Agency in 2020. And I think that should hold true to what happens in the future with that land. That we should honor that agreement that they have with the EPA as well.
I didn't know anything about it. That would be interesting to see.
Yeah, well, when I wrote my letter to them, I pointed that out to them when they started these negotiations, and I appreciated your comments at the meeting. So I think that should be in the forefront of the discussion. And I think that's part of what some of the people's concerns are, is that it's going to be overridden by people.
Well, there's a natural tension between development, which is necessary to enable profit, which is necessary to offset tax costs, and then preservation on the other hand, which is, financially negative.
Well, as an example, we had just had the opportunity to do the Skyline Drive in Virginia. And to see that community in 1940 had the foresight to save that land, that we have that opportunity now to do this with Camp Barton. And that they too should think of it as historical preservation for this property. And I hope that is continued conversation in your negotiations to move forward with this.
Sure. Yeah, and we'll know soon enough, the 40 acres along Route 89 has sold. We'll know soon enough who the buyer is.
That's great.
We'll be able to guess what their intentions are once we find out who it is.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good to see you both.
Yeah. Good to be home.
Yeah.
All right. 25 minutes ahead of schedule. I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss a couple of personnel matters as well as negotiation subject to the Taylor Law.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're in executive session. I am just going to end the live stream. Say happy Pi Day